Afternoon, can you hear me? Okay, so good afternoon everyone, and we are starting. I'm Alessia Torre. We met with many of you here in front of the door, but not for everyone who is online. I'm Alessia Torre and I'm project manager here in the project management group of the Digital Society Center of FPK. I'm glad to open this first Kid Actions Policy Research and Practitioners Forum promoted in the context of the European project Kid Actions, which was funded by the European Commission, DG Justice, under the Rights, Equality and Citizenship Programme. Thanks to those of you who are here, but thanks also to all the people who will follow us online in these 2 days. Our project started this year in January, so it's 1 year now, and together with us, as the Bruno Kessler Foundation, participating in this project with the Digital Society Center and the involvement of the Digital Health and Wellbeing Center. Together with us in this journey, we have 4 partners. We have the Autonomous Province of Trento with a few representatives here today, and Amnesty International Italy, European Schoolnet, and Youth for Exchange and Understanding. It is a pleasure for us also because it is actually the first time we meet all together since the project began, so finally we have the opportunity to stay together and meet in person. The forum, as you know, will be a 2 half-day event. This afternoon and tomorrow in the morning, starting at 9 and ending at lunchtime. The objective of this first forum, because we will have another one at the end of the project in December 2022, the objective, especially for this first forum, is not only to present the preliminary results and findings of this first year of the project activities, but also to open the discussion with policymakers, researchers, and practitioners from all over Europe who are invited here or online as our speakers of today's and tomorrow's session. So they will share with us their experience, their best practice, and they will give us precious inputs on the digital and non-digital tools we are developing within the project, as well as for our policy recommendations we are expected to deliver as a final result of the Actions project. I don't want to say much more about the project because you will hear, especially from Sara Tonelli, who is the project coordinator, a presentation about the project. Before starting and giving the floor to our speakers of the opening session, we are actually still waiting for the last one, Viviana Sbardella, but we will start. I would like to thank all of you, and then a few recommendations for the speakers to keep the time because the agenda is full and there is a lot to hear and discuss today and tomorrow. I would like to ask the audience to actively participate in the discussion. There will be a few dedicated Q&A sessions, and also the participants who are joining us online can ask questions through the chat in Microsoft Teams. So the forum is officially starting. I would like to give the floor to the first 3 speakers of the opening session today, who are Marco Pistore, who is the director of the Digital Society Center of FPK, Viviana Sbardella, who is the school superintendent at the Autonomous Province of Trento and will be with us in a few minutes, and finally Sara Tonelli, who is the project coordinator of the Kid Actions project, and she's also head of the Digital Humanity Research Unit. So please, Marco, the floor is yours.
Thank you all. Welcome in FBK, physically or virtually. It is very good to see that the meetings restart having also a physical part, and let's hope that the proportion moves slowly towards the physical participation to these events In particular, when we have this kind of discussions, the kind of discussions we want to have in this forum, I believe that the physical presence is key. We are social beings, so interacting through physical means, interacting in the same room, I believe, is very important for the kind of work. Well, I'm very glad to be able to host in FBK room, and I'm very happy that the Kid Actions project offered us the opportunity for this forum. Kid Actions, I believe, is a very characteristic project for the kind of work Fondazione Bruno Kessler do, and in particular for the Digital Society Center. Well, Digital Society Center studies the effects of these tremendous penetration of digital technology in our society, how the society changes, and we study both the negative impacts and the positive impacts. Of course, cyberbullying is a negative impact. But there are also positive impacts, since digital technology can provide solutions, tools that we can use to make our society better. I believe that here we will be able to discuss both impacts, so this is very good and central for FBK, but my colleague, the director of the Digital Health and Wellbeing Center, I believe would make similar remarks, thinking to the impact on the person, on the individual, rather than on the society. So this is all from my side. Again, welcome in FBK, physically or virtually, and good work.
Okay, so just a few words on the project. Thanks also from my side for being here and attending this meeting in person or virtually. So as Alessia already said, Kid Actions is a project, and we are now in the middle of it. So the first forum takes place 1 year after we started, and it has been a rather tough year because we had a lot of activities planned with schools, educators, and it hasn't been easy to organize them, but we are. This is a first small success for us. So we hope next year to continue with this. In short, the idea of Kid Actions is to address cyberbullying, targeting children and adolescents between 11 and 19 years old. And we want to do it by setting up a set of tools, toolkits for formal and non-formal education to enable interactive activities through both education and gamification. As I said, we are in the middle of it, and we will have a second forum at the end of next year, hopefully in Brussels. We have basically 3 main goals that we want to address. So the first one is to get a better understanding of the phenomenon. This has been partly done in the first year, where we have studied also existing literature and drafted the socio-technical requirements. Then, as I said, we want to create this, what we call the Kid Actions educational platform, where the idea is to build tools by involving all the stakeholders, which are not only educators, but also the students and the targets of cyberbullying. And the third part is to increase cross-border cooperation. As I said, our partners have a large network of collaborations with schools and educational stakeholders across Europe, and the idea is that we want to reach them through our activities. These are our partners. So FBK is the coordinator of the project, and we are responsible for the digital platform. Then the autonomous province of Trento is setting up all the activities to involve schools and educators in Trentino. And then the Italian chapter of Amnesty International is responsible for the training and the educational path of the project. Another important partner is Youth for Exchange and Understanding, based in Brussels, and they have done a great work during the first year of the project, as I said, to define the socio-technical requirements that will lead to the implementation, the design and implementation of the platform. And finally, the European SchoolNet, that is responsible for dissemination, awareness raising, and networking activities that, as I said, are crucial because in our case, we really want to involve all the stakeholders in this journey. Few words about these 2 days. So we would like to have an event that is as much interactive as possible. So we will have, after this short welcome, first presentation about the research outcomes for this first project here. And then we will have a panel with mainly researchers coming from different research backgrounds discussing the findings that we presented and their experience in relation to research on cyberbullying. And then we will have a keynote by Alex Holmes on bullying. And we will try to close more or less around 6:15. And then tomorrow we will meet again around 9. And we will have after that a presentation of the first tools that we have developed. So the 4 main components that at the moment are available that will be integrated in the platform. And the presentation also of the educational toolkit. So the paths and activities that are foreseen and that we are building starting from the platform. Then we will have a stakeholder roundtable, so again with different stakeholders from the educational sector. And finally, the last half an hour, a discussion, an open discussion to exchange ideas and to plan the next steps of the project. So this is more or less everything from my side. Thanks for participating, and I leave the floor to the third speaker.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that Viviana Sbardella, that I introduced before, she's the superintendent at the Autonomous Province of Trento, is here with us, so I will leave the floor. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for having invited me here to this afternoon where we're going to hear a lot about a very important subject. I'm honored to participate in the first European Policy Research and Practitioners Forum, organized in the framework of Kid Action, a project issued by the foundation that is here hosting the forum, in which the Department of Education and Culture of the Autonomous Province of Trento, together with the Department of Health and Social Policies, is a partner. Preventing and combating bullying and cyberbullying phenomena, which are very often linked, becomes fundamental if we want to achieve a society based on justice and respect for democratic values, in which each person has the right to express who he or she is and what he or she believes in. Unfortunately, peer bullying is still a phenomenon that affects a considerable number of students, especially in face-to-face situations. A recent survey carried out by the Ministry of Education and Secondary Schools in the school year 2020-2021 using the ELISA platform showed that overall 21% of male and female students in the province of Trento said they were bullied by peers, while 16% said they acted out bullying towards peers. This is not very different from the national average, which is 22.3% in the first case and 18.2% in the second case. I'd rather say they're quite worrying numbers. As for the online bullying, 6% reported having suffered episodes of cyberbullying, while 4% said they had actively taken part in cyberbullying episodes. We know that digital technologies help to create new opportunities and improve innovation in education, but also generate unprecedented risks, especially among young people. These are just a few data from the survey to be taken with caution, as not all institutions participated, but not to be underestimated. Also, because there are considerable differences between the episodes reported by the students and those reported by the teachers, which are higher. This suggests that only the most serious and systematic incidents come to the attention of the school, while the others remain in the dark. The fact of physical distancing imposed in schools by the COVID-19 pandemic has actually shifted bullying outside school areas, on public transport, at bus stops, or on the way between school and home. But the question is, how has school responded to this problem? We could say with both structural interventions and bottom-up activities involving students and parents. At a national level, we have several interventions, starting from 2017 with law number 71, which gives the guidelines for prevention and contrast of cyberbullying, and introduces this law the teacher in charge of cyberbullying in schools. 2018, the Digital Civic Education Curriculum, 2020, guidelines for the teaching of civic education in school, and in 2021, guidelines for preventing and combating bullying and cyberbullying, among which contained among the indications the protocol for taking charge and for the certification of the phenomena of bullying and cyberbullying. In addition, the province of Trento, in order to contrast this phenomenon, has adopted new laws and has promoted projects that can increase the institutional capacities. In 4 years, starting from 2017 to 2020, the province issued calls for a proposal on projects aimed at preventing and combating cyberbullying, which included digital citizenship training. In 2020, the guidelines for teaching of civic education in the school were issued. 5 schools in the autonomous province of Trento have acquired anti-bullying certification. Some of the teachers are part of Kid Action's school network project. The forum today is a great opportunity for teachers to deepen knowledge, share experiences on cyberbullying and bullying in an international context. I wish everyone a fruitful collaboration with Kid Action's project and a productive day of work, 2 days of work and discussion among experts. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our 3 speakers for this opening session. Before starting with the other activities, there was something we wanted to show you, which is a video campaign which was realized by our partner Amnesty International on the project. So thank you again, and we will continue with the other sessions that Sarah showed you before. You are ready with the video? Thank you.
In Europa oltre un ragazzo su 5 di età compresa tra i 9 e i 16 anni è stato vittima di cyberbullismo. Francesco, Martina e Giulio hanno provato sulla loro pelle cosa vuol dire essere insultati, esclusi e derisi. Non voltarti dall'altra parte. Partecipa con Amnesty International e Kid Action per mettere fine una volta per tutte al cyberbullismo. Grazie. In Europa oltre un ragazzo su 5 di età compresa tra i 9 e i 16 anni è stato vittima di cyberbullismo.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabrina Vorbau, and I'm from the European Schoolnet team. As Sarah kindly said, we are also one of the partners in the Kid Actions project, and we were involved in the early stage of the project, the so-called research phase, that happened around the first 6 months of the project under the lead of YEU. And we wanted to set the ground for this project, also mostly looking into the current situation of cyberbullying. What does the current research says? And with this, it's my very great pleasure to introduce my colleague Veronica Donoso, who will join us remotely today. Veronica is has a PhD in social science from the KU Leuven, and she's also an online safety consultant for European Schoolnet. I hope, Veronica, you are with us and you're able to hear us. And with this, Veronica, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi, Sabrina. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for the invitation, and I will start sharing my screen.
Yeah, Veronica, in a minute we will also see you. Okay, now we see you perfect.
Yeah. Do you see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So thank you for the invitation. I'm also one of the project partners. I'm working with Sabrina and with a whole team at European Schoolnet, and we were involved in year one, among other things, working with other colleagues from the project on trying to better understand the socio-technical requirements, basically what would be needed to develop better digital tools to combat cyberbullying. But before I refer briefly to some of our findings, I would like you, we thought it was important to give you a brief overview of cyberbullying, what cyberbullying is, and what research in general, not just the research carried out within our project, but actually what research in the last years has taught us. So first of all, and it would be important that we share a common understanding what cyberbullying is and what cyberbullying is not. And to begin with, I think it's important that we acknowledge the fact that there is no just one single definition of cyberbullying that everybody agrees with. So if you look at research, you will find different definitions, and there are some definitions which have been used and highly cited in the literature in the last in the last 10, 12 years, and I wanted to point and to look together with you at these two definitions. So cyberbullying is usually defined as an intentional and repeated harm that others inflict via a digital device. And some other researchers have also pointed out to other characteristics of cyberbullying, for instance, that it's an aggressive, an intentional act carried out by an individual or by a group. And in this sense, it's still very similar to what offline bullying or traditional bullying is. But the main difference would be that it's carried out through electronic media. So like, for instance, through email, through social media, through chat. And an important aspect, I think, that it's still a little bit under discussion. It's like when we talk about bullying, not cyberbullying, there are some aspects that have been pointed out as really important to differentiate bullying from other forms of aggression. And there are mainly two aspects that make it distinctive from other forms of just violence or aggression. The repetitive fact. So if two kids have a fight at school once, that might not necessarily fall under the category of bullying. But if a kid is continuously, intentionally, repeatedly mistreated by others, then we could maybe start thinking there is something else going on. And I think that's one of the things that I wanted you to pay attention to. And also another aspect in offline bullying, it's also the difference in terms of strength, the difference in power. So bullying, when it's physical, then you need to have that difference present. Now, when it comes to cyberbullying, some authors consider those last two aspects as important, but other authors not necessarily. And why not? Because some people say when it's online, there is a big difference. And one of the big differences is that you can reach a large, very large audience only even with one message. So if one kid posts something on the Instagram account of someone else, for example, it can be seen potentially by lots of people. So some people argue that the repetitive aspect of cyberbullying in offline world would be somehow be less important in the online world because it can still have a very big impact on the victims. Another characteristic that distinguishes cyberbullying is the fact that it can be anonymous and also physically distant. So you don't need to be there with the person to inflict harm, to inflict pain. And also the fact that this physical distance also has an important aspect to consider because the bully might not necessarily be aware of what's happening on the other side because they are not directly seeing the other person in pain. They don't see the reactions of the other person necessarily. So they can imagine how the other person feels, but they might also not. So that also has an important impact on how on the kind of damage that can be inflicted. So I wanted to start with this and also to discuss some findings from research. And here at the end of my presentation, you will have a long list of references from all the types of all the research that we have been consulting to come to this very, very short overview. But basically, when it comes to cyberbullying, one important question is how common is it? And the truth is, because it's very, very difficult to understand how common cyberbullying is because of many reasons. But mainly, I would like to point to three. First of all, there are differences, as I said before, in how we define cyberbullying. And therefore, when cyberbullying is measured, and if different definitions are used in different surveys, for example, then people might respond differently. So that's a very logical consequence that we have differences depending on how we define it. The second and very important difference as well is the age. Depending on which group we study, the findings might be very different. Research in the past showed that usually you could see a peak of cyberbullying activity between 13, 15 years old. And probably 10 years ago, that was the age of initiation to social media. But things have been changing. And now we see that younger kids are going online, that kids are also being cyberbullied on gaming platforms. So we see younger and younger children, but we have less certainty as regards of what is the actual age where children start to bully others. And that's also interesting, and we see an evolution there in research. So what I'm trying to say is that depending on the sample that you have, and depending which age the children have in that sample, you could also have sometimes even very significant differences in the results. And we also see very large country differences. So when we compare countries within Europe, outside Europe, even within Europe, and sometimes even within the same country, we do see also very important differences in prevalence of cyberbullying. So it's very difficult to really, really understand how serious the problem is in terms, at least, of the numbers of children who are involved in cyberbullying, the number of children who are victims of cyberbullying. There I have a few examples. So you see, even in the USA, we see very big differences in the time span of 8 years. So in 2010, researchers were talking about prevalence of between 20–40%. In 2010, one research showed that 59% of kids had experienced cyberbullying. Now, this can mean they experience it as bullies, they experience it as victims, but they might also experience it as bystanders. So they just saw it, but just by seeing cyberbullying, it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect you. And there we see other statistics. In Europe, the EU Kids Online project showed approximately 12% of kids had experienced some form of cyberbullying. What does the research say apart from the numbers, apart from what cyberbullying is? I think that we can find, every time you read a new piece of research, you find new evidence. But in general, there is agreement that cyberbullying, as much as bullying in the offline world, they are related to emotional and psychological problems. So we do see a relationship between, for instance, kids who have low self-esteem, kids with suicidal ideation, and problems like this, and there is a relationship with cyberbullying. Now, I'm very careful when I say relationship, and I'm not saying that one thing, that cyberbullying necessarily causes this problem, and also not the other way around. It can be kids who already are prone to these characteristics, they are more prone to be victims of cyberbullying. So when I say relationship, I'm not saying which aspect is actually causing the problem, but I'm saying we see relationship between kids who have been victims of cyberbullying and these types of features. Cyberbullying is also related to problems in the real world, like school problems, antisocial behavior, substance use, delinquency, are also aspects that have been related to cyberbullying. Cyberbullying, no surprise, is very closely related to bullying. So we see kids who bully online tend to bully offline, and the other way around. Kids who have been bullied offline can also be targets of cyberbullying online. And in spite of these findings, cyberbullying still seems to be less common than traditional bullying. Now, there is agreement in the literature that cyberbullying can be serious. And I think this is important here. I try to summarize. These are findings from different studies. It doesn't mean that when one kid is a victim of cyberbullying, they will necessarily suffer from everything that you are seeing here, but they can suffer from one or some of these consequences. What is a fact is that cyberbullying can inflict serious psychological, emotional, and also social harm. And here I just included a summary of things that different research has shown that, for instance, cyberbullying can cause embarrassment, can cause fear, can cause upset, lower self-esteem, anxiety, depression, also problems at school, so lower school performance and things like this. But also in some cases, and I wanted to mention this specifically because the fact that there is some research showing that cyberbullying in extreme cases, or not all cases, but in some extreme cases, can also contribute to self-harm or to attempted or actual suicide. The problem is that we tend to see in the headlines of the news, whenever there is a case of a cyber kid who has been cyberbullied, it really, really reaches the news, and people really tend to panic, and they think, well, my kid could be cyberbullied. Is he going to commit suicide? The truth is that it could happen in extreme cases, but it's not the most common thing that happens, fortunately. And it's also important here to remember that there are many different types of online risks, but not all types of risks necessarily result in harm. And I think this point is important to relate it to two things. One is the fact that some kids may be more prone to become victims. And according to research, there are certain profiles of kids who tend to be more cyberbullied, but it doesn't mean that other kids are not. But kids who tend to be more likely to become victims of cyberbullying tend to be kids with some type of disability, some type of kids with some type of behavioral of mental health conditions, but also kids from lower socioeconomic status. Bullies themselves can also be victims of cyberbullying. Now, what also is important to mention is the fact that not all kids are affected equally. So the same episode can affect a child differently. Why is that? Because children have different individual characteristics. For instance, they have different personality traits, but also they might have different strategies or different coping strategies to handle cyberbullying. So some kids might be better prepared. Some kids might also have, for instance, a social network of support, and others might lack that network. Some kids might have a very good relationship, a relationship of trust with parents, with teachers, with friends, with peers, and those kids might also feel safer at disclosing, for instance, and it might become easier for them to cope with an event. And some other kids might not. So there are many factors that could have an impact on how bad an incident can affect a child. Also contextual factors. For instance, where did the incident take place? Imagine the incident is reported and in a social media platform, and the social media platform reacts immediately, takes the content down, and then take measures very quickly. Then the incident also might have a lower impact. But imagine the same happens on a platform that doesn't react, and doesn't react very quickly, or doesn't react at all, and it takes weeks for the incident to be taken down. So there are many factors, some which are under the control of the child themselves, and others which are not. Now, who is affected by cyberbullying? And we usually tend to talk about the victims only, and I think here it's very important to understand that cyberbullying can affect the child directly, the victim. It can also affect the class environment. It can affect the school. It can affect families. It even can affect communities. And don't underestimate this. For instance, I worked on another project once, and there was a girl that reported to a helpline that someone had taken naked pictures of her while they were changing clothes at school for the sports class. But this girl belonged to a Muslim community. So the impact of having her pictures exposed and her seen naked caused lots of problems to her family, for her in the community, and probably the impact was much bigger than from other child in another situation. So we should really not underestimate the impact that one incident of cyberbullying can have. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip these two slides, but I'm just going to show you very quickly. I summarized two slides with some advice on how to recognize cyberbullying. So I think this could be very interesting for teachers, for people working at schools, people working with teenagers, for instance, but also for parents. So what are the signs that you should look at to understand and to know if your child may be cyberbullying others? And for instance, of the things you should pay attention to is how they use their devices. Are they hiding it from you? Are they showing it for you? Are they demonstrating violent tendencies? Do you think they are cruel towards others? So there are things that you should take into consideration to identify and to be alert if your own child or a student, for instance, at school might be cyberbullying others. The same is useful to understand if your child or someone you know might be a target of cyberbullying, and there also you might start seeing some characteristics that might maybe ring a bell. I would say, I mean, that should make you be alert. Like when they start losing interest in the things that they used to like, when you see that they are like trying not to. They're oversleeping or not sleeping enough, losing weight, like you see them depressed and so on and so forth. But I'm not going to stop here because I know that I should probably you're more interested in the results of our own research. And here, to finalize, I would like to focus on two aspects, on preventing and responding to cyberbullying, because from research we know it can have devastating effects, but what can we actually do? And that was one of the questions that we asked last year, and it was one of the different waves of research that we did. We interviewed 17 international experts about different ways of preventing and responding to cyberbullying, and also specifically in relation also to potential technological solutions. And we interviewed experts from different backgrounds, from scholars, academics, to NGOs, but also industry representatives and educators. And what did they tell us? It was very, very interesting to observe that even though all the people we interviewed came from very different backgrounds, I mean, even policymakers or an academic or someone from the industry, you would say, well, they don't have that much in common, but actually they did agree on a number of points. And these are the ones I summarize here. So what are the main challenges? What are the main obstacles that we have right now to combat cyberbullying? One that everybody mentioned was that online aggression, not only cyberbullying, but different types of online aggression have become really widely accepted. They have become normalized, and young people accept this as, well, okay, it's kind of part of life. So, well, you might be cyberbullied once because that's life. So it's really one thing that every expert mentioned, that it's really bad, the way we treat people. I even remember one interview talking about, there are even presidents who are like basically bullying other people through their Twitter account. So it was really, really powerful to see that this is a challenge identified by everyone, and an important challenge, because it means that we need to change things as society, and it's not enough to tackle the cyberbullying incident in one class, but there are things that as society we need to look and change. Another big challenge identified was that when incidents happen, they're usually hidden from parents, from teachers, from practitioners. So basically, kids don't tell the people who could actually help them. And why? Because according to the experts we interviewed, kids don't feel confident enough. Many times they feel like, well, why would I tell? Nothing will happen. And if something happens, it probably will make the problem worse. So I think that's really, really a big job for us to gain trust from young people. Another problem of cyberbullying, they said physical separation does not happen. And what does this mean? That a kid, it's not only bullied in one place, the bully follows them. When they go to sleep, they see their phone and the bullying is there. So the bullying is 24 hours, 7 days a week, and it's something very, very hard to deal with. The other big challenge is that something that research, and I showed before, children react differently, and children have different coping strategies, and therefore effective strategies to target cyberbullying require some level of personalization. And that's not always easy, and it's usually even expensive to do. Now, a big problem identified by many, even by educators themselves, was that schools and parents are ill-prepared to deal with cyberbullying. They all agreed, we do a lot, we have policies, but many times the policies don't work. Many times the policies are just paper and pen policies. They are there, we have an agreement, but nobody puts it into practice. Or sometimes we have a policy, but only some people follow it. Or there is a policy at school, parents don't know about it. So there were many issues related to how ill-prepared we feel we are as adults to support children. And also, one last challenge is that there are many interventions, they say. There are many materials, there are many awareness-raising campaigns, but we really know very little about what works and what doesn't work. So when it comes to tackling cyberbullying, we have many projects, many programs sometimes running, but we really don't know if they're going to have an impact and are they going to work, because there's not much research about the effectiveness of these programs. So these are the main challenges, and then the experts concluded, and actually this was also in line with what kids told us through a little survey we did, is that what is important is to start early with prevention efforts. So the younger you start, the better was the message, a very strong message we got. Also, that it's very important to support kids to deal with adversity, to learn to cope with their own emotions. They said nowadays, many kids, they don't even know how to deal with their own frustration. And this is something that we really need to support kids to learn to develop self-regulation, to develop empathy, and to understand their emotions and deal with them. They said an important part is the social learning. The kids need to learn to understand their feelings and cope with them. And what else do we need to do? Encourage children, young people's autonomy and also ability to develop their own ways to build resilience. Many experts said many times we develop programs which come from adults. We think as adults, we don't consult with the children, we don't co-create solutions with them, and they need to have agency in this. They know what they need. They need to we need to support kids so that they also are part of the solution. Finally, what else is needed? Because the interviews were so interesting, but I'm so sorry, 20 minutes, I cannot really bring everything we discussed, but probably in the panel, some of the experts actually that I interviewed and that my colleagues interviewed will be with us today and tomorrow, and then we can pick up some of these issues. But what they all agreed that it was important to continue educating, but not just educating children on how to deal and cope and prevent cyberbullying, but we need to educate adults. We need to educate society. We need to educate parents. We need to continue educating teachers, not just to react and respond to cyberbullying, but also very important to prevent it in the first place, to detect it, to know when it's happening, and to know once they know something is happening, we should also educate them to know how to respond. Also, homeschool cooperation was seen as key, because many teachers, many educators said most of the time the cyberbullying incident doesn't happen at school. So why should the school worry about this? Why should the school be responsible? It actually should be the parents' responsibility. Then other people say, but why should be the parents? It happens on a social media platform. Then the responsibility is from the social media provider. So in the end, we came to the conclusion that yes, homeschool cooperation is very important, but also the cooperation with other stakeholders. We cannot expect that cyberbullying will disappear or the numbers will be reduced if we don't all the stakeholders work together. So policymakers, industry representatives, they should also have very good mechanisms in place to deal with cyberbullying. Interesting, but even from many academics, they said we need positive role models, and it would be super interesting to work much more with the public media broadcasters, with radio, with television, do awareness raising campaigns with people who are well known, VIPs, and the influencers. Why people, children follow influencers? We should work with them. Sports people, we need good role models, and children. They could have an important impact in changing perceptions. And last but not least, pay attention to vulnerable children. As I mentioned before, different children, and there are different factors that have an impact on how children cope with adversity. But vulnerable children, they deal with so many levels of adversity. They lack many times social networks. They lack support at home. They might have already many other problems also at school. So they really, really need special attention. When cyberbullying happens there, they cannot just sometimes go home and tell their parents, yeah, please help me, because sometimes the problem starts at home. So we really need to focus on also who are the children who need our help most. And when it comes to digital resources, because our project is about that, developing some potential digital solutions, it was very interesting to see main advantages cited by the experts we interview were like, of course, if you have something online, it can be available at the time and the place where cyberbullying takes place. It can be fun, motivating. Kids love technologies, so developing technological solutions can help reach kids. It can also encourage kids to report, for instance, because they feel that something can happen anonymously. But they said also, please pay attention to what are the needs. Why, if you develop something, you need to understand why you are developing it. Also pay attention to, if you're working with schools, there might be problems in infrastructure, availability. If you want kids to download an app, for instance, not all kids might be willing or able to download it. So they really gave us interesting tips about, like, think about outreaching also, and guidance during implementation. Potential cons, well, serious game, they said, can't compete with high video games nowadays. So that really could potentially be an issue. They are expensive also. Developing technical solutions can be expensive, and there might be unintended privacy risks. They said, for instance, even if a child has an app for self-support, and if someone, I remember in an interview telling us, and someone comes by and look, why are you using that app? Are you being cyberbullied, or are you feeling depressed? I mean, they said, well, even in these little things, you could have an intended impact. So finally, the last recommendations from the experts we interviewed, we said, continue with education, continue with awareness raising, but not just for kids, for everybody. Develop child-centric and peer-to-peer approaches for solutions. Whatever program you develop, make it child-centric. Involve the child, put them at the center of whatever solution, because they know best what they need. They also said that accountability from the ICT sector is very important, that it needs to be increased. So if incidents happen on a platform, they need to react quickly, and they need to provide solutions to the person reporting. We need more monitoring and assessment of the strategy. So it's not just enough develop something. It would be always important to know if what we develop has the impact that we expected it to have, and access to good quality resources for teachers, for everybody, but also not just free and easy access, but they also pointed out multilingual access, that many times we have lots of resources in English and other languages are also important, but there are less resources in other languages. And last but not least, better school policies and better regulation is needed, not just pen and paper. Someone mentioned in the interviews policies, but actually policies that are meaningful, that are developed with the kids, with the parents, with the schools, and that makes sense for the context in which they are used. So thank you so much. Apologies if I took a bit longer. If you want more information about the project and about that specific report I referred to, I added the links also to some blog articles, the newsletter, Twitter, and the Instagram of the project. And as I promised at the beginning, I included all the reference I used today. So if you want to consult them, you can find them in my presentation. So thank you so much. And yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Veronica, for your presentation and for giving us a very brief insight of such a very complex topic, as we all know. and also highlighting the different factors we need to take into consideration when tackling the issue of cyberbullying, and also how we in the Kid Actions project try to set the ground and set the framework for all the activities and tools we are going to develop as part of this project. And you will hear much of this in the next day. We still have a few minutes left, so if there's anyone here or also remotely with us who has a question for Veronica, please raise your actual or virtual hand and we will be able to give you the microphone. Any question in the chat, perhaps? I don't see anyone here in the room, and also no. So your presentation must have been very clear.
I hope. But if you don't have questions now, but you have questions afterwards, I also added my email. If someone feels more comfortable maybe discussing something afterwards, feel free to send me questions also to my email, questions about the project, and we would be happy to answer afterwards.
Thank you very much, Veronica. And I think we're going to the next session. And I give the mic back to Alessia.
Yeah, of course, we will have then a final Q&A session. So if more questions will come even later, our speakers will be with us. So we are ready to introduce the panel session with our speakers. Part of them are here with us, and Sarah is aware of this new session, while some of them are together with us but online. So please, Valerio, Anita, and Davide, take a seat here with us, and thank you, Michelle and Heidi, for being with us online. And Federico, I'm sorry, Federico, you were not in the slide, but you are there, I guess, sorry.
Okay, thank you. So the idea of this panel is to discuss some of the findings that we have just heard, and in general activities around the topic of cyberbullying with domain experts from the research, so from academia. And we have 3 experts on site and 3, I think, online. And they all have different background and work in different research communities. So we have on site Anita Lavorgna from University of Southampton, Valerio Basile from University of Turin, and Davide Cino from Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore in Milan. And then we have online Federico Faloppa from University of Reading, Michelle O'Reilly from University of Leicester, and Heidi van de Bosch from University of Antwerp. So, well, my first request is to just give a brief introduction of your activity. And maybe to facilitate communication, we start from the speakers on site, and then we leave the floor to those who are attending online. So, Anita, can you? Yeah. Can you hear? Could you press?
Yeah, okay, that's much better, sorry. So I was just saying hello everyone, I'm Anita Lavorgna, I'm Associate Professor at the Department of Sociology, Social Policy and Criminology at the University of Southampton, a nice city about 1 hour south from London. I'm really happy to be here because actually I did all my studies here in Trento. I study law here and also my PhD in international studies here in Trento before moving to the UK. My main research expertise, research area is about cyber harms. So even if I'm a criminologist, I tend to work on those online socio-technical activities that are not always criminal, not always deviant, but still can cause severe social harms. And as we just have seen in the previous presentation, cyberbullying, of course, is a typical example of this. I'm interested in not only the primary victims, but also in the secondary victims. So, for instance, the family, friends, the small community around the primary victims, but also in so-called tertiary victimization, so basically society at large. And as we was mentioned before, cyberbullying, again, is one of those activities. Is a typical cyber harms that might not always be against the law, but you know, have these like serious repercussions. As regards some of my more recent activities, I've been working a lot of information pollution online, and I'm currently leading a project of on sharenting practices, which is not cyberbullying per se, but there is a lot of overlapping with this, meaning that it has to deal with the sharing of personal information online, often not in a malicious way, but still can cause severe social harms. So again, thanks for inviting me, and that's a very short overview of what I do.
Thank you. Valerio?
Hello everyone, I'm Valerio Basile. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Turin, here in Italy. So first of all, thank you for inviting me as well here. I work in a group called, inside the Department of Computer Science at the University of Turin, in a group called Content-Centered Computing. And it's a group made of people like myself, computer scientists, but also philosophers and linguists, so it's a very interdisciplinary group. Most of us work with language, with natural language. So this is what we do mainly, natural language processing, so technology applied to the study of natural language. And since 5 years ago or so, we started working more and more in the field of abusive language detection and analysis, and especially hate speech. We've run a few projects. I will not enumerate them all, but I just want to mention a couple of them, because one is still running, actually. It's in its beginning. It's somehow related to this beautiful project that's been presented today. The project there is called The Activate, and the point in common is that also we go into schools and talk to you know, children, students, and teachers. So definitely that validates the point that, you know, we need to act at that level as well. But we also do a lot of other things, of course. And another thing I wanted to mention is that we are running a, well, we sent a proposal for a coast action, which is basically a request for funding to build a very large network of institutions, but also companies at the European level. We have 24 countries and about 70 partners, including the FBK. So we work together often. And yeah, so hate speech, just as the case of Anita here, hate speech is not exactly the same thing as cyberbullying. I think that main difference is that hate speech tends to be public and cyberbullying tends to be private. But there are a lot of things in common, especially from a technological point of view. So maybe we'll talk also about that a little bit later. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes. Hi, I'm Davide Cino. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Università Cattolica in Milan. And thank you so much for inviting me here. Just to describe myself, my background is basically in education and communication. I got a PhD in education in contemporary society, which I got from the Università Bicocca in Milan, with a very long period spent at the communication department at Northwestern University in Chicago. My area of expertise concerned basically children, online, and digital parenting. I've been studying for a very long time myself, actually, the topic of sharenting, which is not related per se to cyberbullying, but it has to do with identity construction and how children identity is constructed online. And in the past 1.5 years, I've been starting working on these 2 Horizon projects, one of which is called Y Skills, which is an Horizon project which basically studies how digital skills can work as a buffer against risk for children online. So I guess my understanding here is that we can try and understand how more digital competent children can actually prevent cyberbullying to occur and can actually respond better to cyberbullying event and become more resilient, yes. And this is basically my background. Thank you.
Thank you. So now a few words from participants online. Michelle O'Reilly, maybe? Can we start from? Okay. Can you briefly introduce yourself and your work?
Yes, certainly. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent, great. Hello, so I'm Dr. Michelle O'Reilly. I work at the University of Leicester. I'm an associate professor of communication in mental health and a chartered psychologist in health. So unlike all the other speakers, I'm less of an expert in digital, but my main area of research is in child mental health. I also work for Leicestershire Partnership NHS Trust as part of the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. So I specialise in research with vulnerable groups of children and adolescents predominantly, doing research with homeless children, looked after children, refugee children, children with emotional and behavioural challenges, SEND, special educational needs children, and those kind of groups. And of course they are much more susceptible to being bullied, both in person and cyberbullying. I've been doing a couple of projects recently on digital media and mental health. So one of my main areas of interest is around the relationship between social media use and mental health, both in a positive and a negative direction. So we've been looking at how social media might be harnessed for mental health promotion tools, how we can promote well-being and encourage resilience building, etc., as well as the more negative side. I specialise in self-harm and suicide prevention, as well as neurodevelopmental conditions. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. Heidi van den Bosch.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
My name is Heidi van den Bosch. I'm a professor at the Department of Communication Studies at the University of Antwerp in Belgium, where we have been conducting research on cyberbullying since 2005, so for almost 16 years right now. So in the first phase, we have really focused on investigating the problem itself. So what is cyberbullying? How can we measure it? Who is involved? What is its impact? And later on, we really evolved towards research that really focused on how can we also tackle cyberbullying. And then we looked, for instance, at the roles that parents can play, schools can play, but we also looked at, for instance, what the police should do or what social media platforms should do. We also developed some concrete tools, also often in collaboration with other organizations. For instance, we created a prototype of a serious game that was actually targeting its goal was to promote positive bystandership amongst adolescents. But we also tested, for instance, ideas such as reflective interfaces, which are a kind of pop-up messages that are shown to young people when they are about to post something negative, a cyberbullying comment online, and which actually makes them think twice before they actually post it. We've also collaborated with, indeed, people from computational linguistics to see whether we can easily detect cyberbullying or not. So is it something that is feasible, or is cyberbullying something that is not that easy to detect? And if it's possible to detect cyberbullying, is it also something that is desirable? So parents, young people, are they really in favor of such a technology or not? We also actually developed a tool that was meant for school teams, which actually made kind of overview of what they should integrate in their whole school policy. So if you want to tackle cyberbullying, what kind of actions should you do? And that's also encouraged the discussion amongst the team members. So actually we have tried different and designed different types of tools, and I hope they can also inspire this project, of course.
Great, thank you. And now the same question for Federico Faloppa.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm Federico Faloppa, I'm a professor of Italian Studies and Linguistics in the Department of Languages and Cultures at the University of Reading in the UK. I've been working on discrimination and language for the last 20 years of my life as a scholar, as also an activist and as a teacher. And I've been working on the deconstruction of stereotypes, particularly ethnic and gender stereotypes in language, not just in Italian, but across different languages. As a scholar, I've also been working on detecting and monitoring hate speech, particularly in the last few years, in order to find the patterns and dynamics of related to hate speech in terms of pragmatics and sociolinguistic patterns. And I'm also a coordinator of a national network. Rete Nazionale per il Contrasto ai Discorsi e Fenomeni d'Odio is a national network in Italy, including 40 different subjects, including the Fondazione Bruno Kessler, Amnesty International, and major players, major partners and stakeholders working on these issues in Italy. And I'm also one of the 16 members of the Committee of Experts on Combating Hate Speech of the Council of Europe. We are currently actually rewriting the new recommendation, the recommendations for the 47 states of the Council on hate speech, and we're gonna finish the next draft very soon. And in this draft, we try to have a comprehensive approach to hate speech, including cyberbullying and cyberbullying as one of the phases of the problem of the perspective that we can have also on the problem. As been said already, hate speech and cyberbullying and cyberbullying do not overlap always, but they are quite interconnected. And so I'm very happy to be here as an expert on hate speech, and I'm going to try to tell you, I'm going to try, to share what I do, also in terms of research, monitoring, advocating, and contrasting at different levels hate speech and cyberbullying in society. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. So now I have drafted a few questions to guide the discussion, but if you have additional questions or you would like to have more information from our speakers, feel free to raise your hands or write questions in the chat. So to start, I'd like to start from Valerio, also because he has to leave earlier. So my first question is for you, if you can tell us what you think are the biggest challenges that we are facing now in the fight against cyberbullying from the perspective of your research area.
Okay, thank you for the consideration. Indeed, apologies, I will have to leave a little bit earlier. So what are the challenges? Now, just to repeat myself, my area is the computational linguistics, so it's a technological point of view on how we can develop technologies, computer technologies, to analyze, monitoring, support, combating abusive language, cyberbullying. There are many challenges. So the first things that the first goal that were set by the first pioneer researchers in computational linguistics about 10 years ago or so, were to detect hate or more in general abusive language. So that was the first thing we tried to do, and we are still doing it because as it was said already by Heidi a few minutes ago, it is not easy because of many reasons, because language is complicated by itself, because there are many levels to the analysis of language. Federico Faloppa was mentioning pragmatics, for instance. This is all stuff that is already complicated by itself without going into abusive phenomena. Some things are easier than others. So the detection of direct threat or a direct offense, maybe That's easier. That's something that a computer can reasonably do today in multiple languages. Other things are more difficult to detect. More implicit hate or implicit abuse in language is still a difficult thing to do. So we're still studying and developing language resources, artificial intelligence model, etc. So this is I would say it's more a long-term challenge. It's a challenge that it's there, and it will be there for a long time as well, gradually solving it incrementally. But then even when, even in the areas where we succeed somehow to detect successfully abusive language, there are still parts where we completely fail, like there's a lot of study in the past 1 or 2 years about how to distinguish and detect in the more implicit expressions of bullying or abuse. So everything that it's said but not said, not explicitly said. And that's very difficult for natural language processing, because many times the source of abuse is not in the language. Maybe it's in an image. So we need what we call multimodal technologies, which are, again, it's another complication. And then going further, even when we are able, even if we were able to detect that, well, most of artificial intelligence today is based on data. So we say something in the machine learning area that we create models that are garbage in, garbage out. So they learn, these kind of computational models learn from data, from examples, from large data sets, like the one you produce, for instance. So thank you for doing that. But this data it needs to be good. It means that it needs to be, for instance, void of biases. If we have data perhaps annotated by a bunch of, let me be blunt, white PhD students from Cambridge, we will never get the perspective of, some of the real victims of hate speech, but also that also applies to cyberbullying, as you can see. So we need to create data the right way is still very difficult, because we are used to create data in a different way for problems that don't have these issues, like the study of syntax, maybe something that's very objective. We never had to think about, and this is another aspect, we never had to think about ethics before, but now if we're going to create data sets by asking bullies or asking people that have been bullied to judge the content of abuse in language. Now, this is much more difficult to create. It involves, it implies an involvement from the human subject that we are computer scientists. We are not used to do that. And that is why projects like this that are highly interdisciplinary really have that added value, because we realize now that we need to talk to social scientists, to people in the humanities, and to people in law studies and in communication studies. This is something we cannot get away with. We cannot do that as technologists alone. Then there are just a few more bits. There are also other challenges that are maybe more practical, but they are still there, like the privacy of data. Like I said in the beginning, cyberbullying is typically a private phenomenon, right? You find it in private conversations between people. Hate speech in this regards is easier to access to, because you find it online. Unfortunately, you find it very in the open. But it's not easy, and sometimes it's not possible, it's not legal, and for a good reason, to access data from private chats, from private conversations. We just cannot get those data, so we cannot study it, and we cannot create model for that. And there's a whole problem of ethics, treating this data ethically. The data disappear as well. There's something called data decay. As much as we like to think that when it's posted, it's forever, that's not true at all. The messages online on social networks and forums, they just disappear. Especially when they are abusive, they rightfully so. They are deleted online. So there's also all these more practical problems, but they are still open, most of them.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to make the same question to Anita, because she has probably a different perspective from sociology, social policy, and criminology. So what do you think are the biggest challenges from your research perspective?
Yeah, sure. So that's a tough question, I have to say, because there are like so many challenges we need to mention. So my perspective is the perspective of a qualitative social scientist, even if I have to say that I'm very often working my project with computer data scientists. So I will try to bring in a little bit also of that like interdisciplinary perspective to my commentary here. So challenges, I think that well, a lot of the things that I had in mind to say have already been slightly addressed before by my colleague here and by Veronica before. So I will try to go a little bit beyond what I initially had in mind and try to stress a couple of key points that I think might matter in this debate. And these key points have mostly to do with the fact that cyberbullying is a cultural problem and cyberbullying is a socio-technical problem. And I will try to first start by stressing some of the things that I think, at least in my opinion, from my perspective, are some of the limits of existing research on the topic, and then I will try to give a little bit of my perspective in some of the things that I think are still problematic in preventing and addressing this type of issues. So let's start with research problems. So we have an increasing body of research on cyberbullying, as we have an increasing body of research on, since the last 20 years or so, on cybercrimes, cyber harms, etc. However, this research still has some problems, meaning that this research is increasingly more, but of course compared to other types of research is still relatively thin. We don't have much of this research out yet, even if it's more and more. This research has some issues nowadays. It's still because we don't know much about the topic. We know more and more about these topics, but we are still learning a lot. So more research is of course welcome, but this research tends to be often theoretically thin, tends to be still quite descriptive compared to other types of research, meaning that we have a lot of an increasing amount of data, an increasing amount of statistics, etc. But there is still a lot to interpret, to try to understand some golden thread, linking this research, trying to give us something that goes beyond the specific description of a specific case studies or things like that. The other big problem that we have with existing research is that it's very geographically and linguistically bound. And by saying that, I mean that I'm thinking about research that's been published in the US or in the UK, often around these topics. They tend to be based on relatively small samples. So for instance, interviews or surveys done within, I don't know, one school or one specific setting. Bullying is a cultural issue. And as such, what is, and it's also in the eye of the beholder, basically, right? So as was stressed by Veronica, I think before, what is cyberbullying might be, what I might be perceiving as cyberbullying might not be perceived precisely the same by, I don't know, a person from another gender, from another disciplinary background, coming from a different, from different ethnicity or things like that. So a lot of the research that we have about, for instance, victims of cyberbullying, etc., has this limitation of being culturally and geographically bound. So more and more comparative research is definitely needed from a qualitative perspective to better understand all this type of issues. So this type of more large scale, large scope projects are definitely much welcomed in this sense. So as a cultural problem, and then as a socio-technical problem. And here I just have to start echoing what my colleague was saying before about the need of interdisciplinarity in this type of efforts, meaning that when we think about cyber harms, so cybercrime research, we, for a long time, sadly, we had different disciplines working a little bit in silos. So we had computer scientists with their approaches on the topic, we had criminologists, lawyers, social legal studies, linguistics, etc., working a little bit on their own. Now, luckily enough, this type of, like silosing is a little bit breaking down. So there is more and more interdisciplinary research on the topic, and it's in my view this is like really necessary, meaning that computer scientists, data scientists need some expertise, right, in interpreting data, in like sometimes asking the right questions, because there are like social scientists with a type of expertise. Social scientists, on the other hand, really need to assess and to manage very often very large amount of data, and we are a little bit like lost without computational approaches, right? So joining forces is really the path forward, as I see it. I truly believe in expertise and competence. I really don't believe in disciplines, to be honest with you. But still, there is a lot of resistance in doing this. Generally, it's not something that it's easy for academics or for career perspectives or things like that. And until we don't solve this type of issues, I think that research will really be lacking and running a little bit like late compared like to social reality because of these very pragmatic and problems. The last thing that I wanted to say, if I still have like a few seconds here, was so socio-technical. Well, it's really, how to say, like knowing more and raising awareness, but in a let's say complete perspective. So going a little bit like trying to connect to what was said before. I think it was again still Veronica at the end of the presentation when we're discussing about like raising awareness, etc. So I'm just thinking about the attention that we still have about like victims, about families, about communities, and how to increase resilience and all this type of how to say like tools and like ways to help and support victims, etc. What I think is complementary to this in a way is really to investigate more, also research-wise, the other side, if you want, and the side of bullying. So we, because of the type of research just that has been carried out, also because of the like ethical like challenges that we have to face when we carry out this type of research, so on and so forth, or for data availability, we still tend not to know a lot about bullies, their motivations a little bit, their, how to say, like a better breakdown and understanding of everything that is behind their perspective. And I think that's really necessary to be able to have better targeted, for instance, awareness raising activities. And so probably it's one of the big challenges, having more and better of this data from my perspective, which again is just my perspective. And thanks for the attention.
Thank you. Thanks for the very interesting remarks. Well, my next question is for Federico. We heard that you are involved in a number of interesting initiatives, so I wanted to ask you if you can describe one or a few of these projects that you think were successful or impactful in addressing cyberbullying, or as in your case, as you mentioned, hate speech.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I'm going to also touch upon a few things that have been said already, because they were very, very interesting also from my point of view, i.e. data collection and what we need to do in order to create a comprehensive action against, to combat bullyism and hate speech. But first of all, we need networks, and that's why, also, talk about the network that we have in Italy. We need networks, interdisciplinary networks that can target, that can tackle the issue from different sides and perspectives, and also can advocate, can monitor, can combat and contrast, but can also collect new data and new methodology. So we need these networks in order to pull together different actors under the same kind of umbrella and agenda. As a network, as the Rete Nazionale per il Contrasto ai Discorsi e Fenomeni d'Odio, the Italian network I'm coordinating right now, we do have quite a few interesting examples, actually, of combating cyberbullying and hate speech in a very innovative way. Few examples in which a few partners from the network have been involved the last few years. The first one that comes up to my mind is Silence Hate. There was a network, a European project financed by the EU, run by Amnesty, Zafiria, and other partners across Europe, in order to create community of practices across Europe among teachers, students, but also journalists, so working with media professionals together with students and teachers to highlight what is relevant when we talk about these issues. So it's not just what happens in the classroom or what happens in the dynamics of the classroom, but also the way in which we report on these phenomena, and in the way in which we tell these phenomena, and we try to investigate them also through the media and the media partners. Then we have very good best practice also across Italy and Europe through Amnesty Kids, which was designed for schools, and not just for teenagers, but also for younger students. We need to tackle these cyberbullying and phenomena at a much younger age. A few years ago, we thought that cyberbullying was a problem of teenagers. Now we need to go to to lower schools, even to talk to people of 8 or 9 years of age, because that where these problems may start already. So we need to update our methodologies, our approaches, and we need to involve more and more people and students and teachers at different levels. There's another very interesting project run by COSPE, Florence, and other actors across Europe. So I'm just talking about the major player in our network now, in our Rete Nazionale. COSPE is running a project which is entitled Play Your Role, i.e. trying to create communities of gamers in order to tackle cyberbullying and hate speech through gaming, and also to create a new way of approaching the problem through video games. But in terms of community of practice, is also to see how gamers perceive these issues and these problems in video games and in communities. Is that a problem? Well, to what extent is perceived as a major problem? By whom? When? Is that part of the designs of games, or is just something that happens when people play and afterwards? And I think it's a very interesting project because normally gaming is something that we don't think too much when we talk about hate speech, but actually gaming and gamers, gamers can be real agents of change when we tackle these issues across Europe, not just in Italy. And then we have Speak Human, a campaign by Vox Diritti, another stakeholder that we have in the network. I try to create counter narratives or alternative narratives when you have, for instance, body shaming or cyberbullying, or some kind of grounds or motivations for discrimination, to create a counter action by the same kids, the same students that may be targeted by this. And then we have major actions by, again, Amnesty International. I think of the Task Force Hate Speech, which involves 100 activists almost every day to tackle hate speech across the network, but also to create communities that support people targeted by hate speech and cyberbullying, and then also try to create further discussions, not just to actually to stick to polarization, but to try to find to work on the gray zones that we may have in the web and across different social media. And just to be clear about this, I've been working on these issues for a very long time myself as a linguist, and I believe that, of course, online, the online environment is what matters, but we don't need to forget that this also happens offline. And so involving people offline means having a dialogue, a conversation with different players and stakeholders. When we talk about, for instance, a town, a community, a city space, we need listening zones for people that are targeted by cyberbullying and hate speech, and which means that we need to tell people what are their rights, because maybe they don't know about their rights, they don't know about the legislation, they don't know what they can do, and also whom they can talk to when they are targeted by this phenomena. We need to create networks to support victims, the so-called victims of cyberbullying and hate speech, not to let them feel isolated when they are targeted by hate speech. So we need to actually work among peers, i.e. let's create community of practices that are supporting victims, that are letting them feel that they are not a minority that needs to be silenced, but they can be vocal about their rights. They can be vocal against the haters and the people that are targeting them. And also we need to measure the impact of these actions, online and offline. I think this is something that sometimes we don't think of that much. Impact, what is the change that we can measure in time? We do a lot of actions that are very effective, maybe in a week time, in a very specific occasion and for a very specific kind of project. But what do we know about that impact in 1 year time, in 2 years time? Are we contributing to help people, students, kids, to become agents of change, and to not just to be aware of what happens now and to them, but also what they can do in time, and in order to be themselves leading new initiatives and new projects across schools, across communities, online and offline. And so be vocal, I think, is a very key point for us. And yeah, comparative approaches, absolutely. I totally agree with that. We see that at a European level, as a committee of experts at the Council of Europe. We see that if we don't have a European comparative approach, sometimes we don't get the reality, the full picture of the problem. And I was involved on behalf of the Council of Europe in 3 major projects, actually 2. One is still, is going to start very soon. One in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we created community of practices also to work on memory, language, and conflict. Again, offline, not just online, because these kids and students live in their own environments, in their own families, where conflict has been present for the last generation. So how can we tackle that and empower them, but also disentangle this conflict, in a way that they can understand it and they can find something to combat that, something real, some measure and some action that are feasible, doable, that are not just, an abstraction by scholars, in Brussels or in Strasbourg. And then we need to create, I think, new methodologies to collect data, but also to engage with people. I understand that collecting data online is a priority for us, for all of us. But actually, I run a project in Albania on behalf of the Council of Europe. We interviewed 2,000 people. Interviewing them means that you engage with them. You share a lexicon with them. You share, again, rights, legislation with them. You try to understand, in that kind of interaction, not just, by asking them to tick boxes. In that kind of interaction, how they can think of that or what they have, felt and they have been experienced, in time. So you create a community through interviewing them, through engaging with them at that level. I think this is crucial. We don't need to just, of course, the priority is to collect data, online and to have big data sets. I totally agree with that, on that. But we also need to engage with people offline a bit more often to collect their experiences, their emotions, their way in which they re-articulate what they feel and what they have experienced, when they have been victims, or even if they are perpetrators of hate speech and cyberbullying. Don't forget, and this is what I tell students when I go to schools myself, that hate speech or cyberbullying may happen. It's part of your life, may be part of your life. Don't feel guilty, don't be silent, don't silence yourself if you have been perpetrators also of this phenomena. Not just victims, but also perpetrators. Why did it happen? What can you do in order to, to actually to reflect upon their own experience, that you have done? And so, in terms of experiences and reflecting, of course, deconstructing stereotypes and narratives around these issues. I think this is still crucial. We have stereotypes and misrepresentation, everywhere, in schools, in textbooks, in many places that are, part of their everyday life, or students' everyday life. And also, we need to actually to work on 2 awarenesses, actually, 2 ways of making them more aware. First of all, digital competence. Of course, we know it, and we need to tell them, that the digital environments are not that easy. They are not that straightforward. They are actually very tricky and very problematic. But also the linguistic competence, i.e., the use of language in real situations, pragmatically, because they may be fully aware of the digital competence of the issues, digitally. But if they use language, they are not aware of the fact that some registers, some words, some expressions can really, harm people because they think, oh, this is normal. I'm just joking. I've been using this language, among my friends, But yeah, but the environment is, is different. That language can go to thousands of people, can go to people that you don't know. We need to tell them that language is a priority for us. Language means not just the lexicon of hate and cyberbullying, but also pragmatics, i.e. what to use when to whom, not to harm people that easily. Students and kids don't know it, don't know this. Not even people of my age, but students don't know it. We need to combine media literacy and also language, linguistic competence together, online and offline, working on the targeted, people targeted, but also on the people that are perpetuating this, to try to, let me say that, to work with them and make them re-articulate what they've done, not to victimize them, not to tell them you are a criminal only. Wait a minute, let's look at the phenomenon and let's try to understand why that happened to you in that particular context. We need to work, at that level, with multiple kinds of actors and stakeholders, and also try to have a comparative approach to this phenomena, because we need to find standards that can protect us and our communities. So standards not just in terms of legislations, but community standards. But we also need to find maybe processes or dynamics that are just, the same in different countries. And if they are not the same ones, we need to understand what is contextual and what is, specific in that kind of environment and national context. We have a lot to do. We've done a lot. There's so much, best practice and good practice across Europe, but we need to join forces, as, someone has said that very clearly, very effectively, a few minutes ago. And we also need to work online and offline and to update our methodologies and our ways of engaging with people on these phenomena. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It was very interesting and full of information. So my next question is to Davide, but feel free also to comment on what the other speakers said. So same question for you is, are you aware or were you involved in projects, initiatives that you think were successful concerning the fight against cyberbullying?
Yeah, so absolutely. If I have to think about practical project, and by practical I mean project that are aimed at practitioners, I cannot help but thinking about Parole Ostili, just to mention one, which is a project which actually provided a lot of information and a lot of materials for educators and for teachers, so to address the problem of cyberbullying with students. Another open access resource is the MOOC by the CREMIT, which is the research center on media, education and technology of Università Cattolica. And this is another good example, in my view, of how we can use research to inform practice, and now we can create tools for practitioners to use. As a researcher, if I have to think about projects that I've been involved to, but that also inform my understanding of the phenomenon, I could not help by thinking about UKids Online. I think UKids Online is probably one of the most important projects we need to refer to every time we think about the relationship between the internet and children at an European level. We just mentioned about how important it is for us to have a bigger picture, to understand what trends we can see and we can find across Europe. And I think that UKids Online actually does that and did that throughout its several data collection. And there are many good lessons that we learned from UKids Online. First of all, we know that the internet is here to stay. So like it or not, we need to understand the internet not as a separate word, but as a part of our lives, our daily life. And this includes children too. There are, of course, risks and opportunities, and these are positively correlated online. So this means that if we go online, there are always going to be risks, but there are also going to be opportunities. So we need to understand what can promote opportunities and defend by risk. And this is, I think, the same in, if we think about sending out a child outside to explore an environment. If we do not allow children to go out and explore on their own, they will not have the opportunity to learn about that environment. And this applies to the internet as well. And of course, the internet offers the risk for cyberbullying, but we also need to think, and this is another lesson from UKids Online, whether the risk actually translate into harm. We do know that there are several variables that we need to keep in mind. The child, of course, and its resilience and its personal characteristics, the context he lives in, the contents that he is faced with. But we also know from YouKids Online that there is generally an overlapping between bullying offline and online. But what is important to understand is that when we are sharing and communicating online, we're actually transpassing and crossing the traditional space and time boundaries of interpersonal communication. So what happens online may stay there, and it may also reach a broader audience. So this is very, very important to consider when teaching kids certain skills, because it is important to understand that while matters of frequency are of course relevant, something that even ends up only once online may be very dangerous for somebody. And I think YouKids Online actually also gave us a lot of important information in terms of how much cyberbullying is spread across Europe. Now, thinking about my national situation, the latest data that we can find in the latest report tells us that around 11% of kids were reported to be victim of cyberbullying and 7% to have bullied someone online. And it is interesting to reflect on this data by comparing them with what we found out with another project that I worked on, which is Kidikoti, which is Kids' Digital Lives in Corona Times by the Joint Research Center. And what we found in this project, for example, with respect to my country, is that the percentage of children who experienced cyberbullying during the pandemic was extremely high. It was over 50%. So we tried to run some analysis to see what happened, and we found out that the increased time spent online, of course, but especially the emotional distress that children experienced actually led to more opportunities for cyberbullying to occur. More emotionally distressed children were more likely not only to be bullied, but also to bully other people, other children. And also, children who have been bullied were more likely to bully other people. And this kind of showed this relationship between being a bully and bullying others. So I think this teaches us that we do not have to treat cyberbullying as something that only concerns the perpetrator, but also the victim, because it may create these dark circles where, you know, we kind of harm each others. And now this leads me to the two projects that I'm mostly working on right now, which are Y Skills and CORE. Y Skills stands for Year of Skills, and CORE stands for Children Online Research and Evidence. I think that what is important of Y Skills is that we are studying through three longitudinal surveys that are aimed at collecting data from children aged 12 to 17, how digital skills can impact their daily lives online, how digital skills can help them gain opportunities from their online experiences, but also protect themselves from risks and harms, and avoid that risk translate into harms, of course. And cyberbullying is one of them. The original approach in Y Skills is that we are considering different dimensions of digital skills, among which are communication skills. And when we think about communication skills, we are actually measuring even a pragmatic component of communication skills. We are asking children to what extent they're able to critically evaluate what they communicate online when they communicate with other people. And this is important because we do need to understand to what extent our children are able to understand the ramification of what they communicate online. We also have items measuring whether children understand what is appropriate to post about themselves or someone else online, items to see whether they know steps to take in terms of what to do online to stop or to try to prevent something bad to happen to someone else or to oneself, and also how to recognize cyberbullying experiences. So I believe that once we will have this data. We just finished the first wave of data collection. So once we will have this data, this will be very informative in terms of where we can go and how we can promote digital skills as a whole, as a buffer against phenomenon like cyberbullying. Finally, I would like to briefly mention the core project, because a lot is said and a lot is thought about the relationship between children and media, and this goes for cyberbullying as well. But quite often it is very hard, especially for people who are outside of academia, to grasp what research findings says. What we're doing with CORE is creating this database, open access, where we are basically collecting all the evidence, empirical evidence, on children online across Europe from a plethora of European countries. And we are creating this platform where different stakeholders, such as educators, policymakers, teachers, parents, and also researchers, of course, can go, so that they can find a more easy to read, a more friendly version of research findings that also concern risk online, including cyberbullying. And I believe all of this can constitute best practice to better conceptualize intervention and help, and facilitate the work of those who practically do something to prevent certain situations and help children develop skills to prevent certain situations and address them when they happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My next question is for Heidi. So we heard from your presentation that you already were involved in projects aimed at building tools and using also technologies to fight cyberbullying and understand more the phenomenon. So I wanted to ask you which suggestions you have, something that we should take into account, given that we also want to build our toolkit for children and educators. So from your experience, what should we take into account in Kid Actions?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think first important thing, of course, when developing tools, whether they be technological or not, is to indeed start from as much evidence as possible. There is quite a lot of research on cyberbullying, so I do think that we should start from the insights that we have gained through that research. And I think it's really important to look at what are the positive behaviors that we should try to promote. For instance, in the game project that we did, we really started from the observation that a lot of young people who witnessed cyberbullying actually don't do anything. So they see it happening, but they don't react. And by not reacting, they actually reinforce the bully. And it also creates the impression amongst the victims that indeed others approve of this situation. So one important behavior that we wanted to change was to indeed change not reacting to cyberbullying instances into more positive behavior, like upstander behavior. So we wanted young people to react against the cyberbullying and to support the victim. So I do think that that is one observation from research, and that we should take that into account when trying to develop tools. And then, of course, if we want to promote positive bystander behavior, we also have to know what kind of determinants we have to address. So why actually are young people not reacting? Are they perhaps afraid that they will become the next victim? Is that the reason why they don't react to cyberbullying when they see it? Or don't they know how to react? So is it a kind of knowledge problem? So if we also know what causes the negative behavior or what could stimulate the positive behavior, it's actually important then to create tools that indeed are able to change the behaviors in the positive direction. So in this case, we developed a kind of serious game where young people could practice positive bystander behavior in a really safe environment. So that's, I think, a very important observation, that it's important to start from scientific evidence. What I also think that is important is that we should try to develop tools that really fit into what has been described as a whole school approach to bullying and to cyberbullying. So this is a kind of approach that really acknowledges that we need a lot of activities that are aimed at prevention, but also at the detection or reporting of cyberbullying and bullying, and also at solving the problem when it is there. And it also acknowledges that we not only need a lot of different actions, but also that we need many types of actors in this process. So indeed, we have to involve not only students and teachers, but indeed, perhaps we also need the police in some serious instances, or we need the help of the social media platforms themselves, or as Veronica also mentioned, we certainly also need the help of parents. So we need different kinds of activities, different kinds of tools, also aimed at different types of actors. And I think that that is very important, because what you do and what is perhaps targeted at one group can also be effective only when other groups are being targeted. Just to go back to my example, so we, for instance, wanted to promote positive bystandership amongst young people. And one of the things that we wanted to promote was also, well, if you can't solve it yourself, if it's really a kind of serious incident of cyberbullying, please go and report it to an adult. Report it to your teachers, report it to your parents, report it to the social media platforms. So, but it is not very useful to try to promote that amongst young people if parents and teachers and social media platforms don't know how to act upon that reporting from the students. So we shouldn't only teach students that they should report, but also parents and also teachers how they should react when a student really says, like, okay, I have encountered this. Because we also know from research indeed that many teachers actually don't know how to handle such a situation. And I think that that really shows that, yeah, a whole school approach is really important, and that all parts, all components of the system should actually collaborate together, otherwise it will fail the system. So that is also a second important thing that I would like to mention. So I think the whole school approach, where you tackle bullying and cyberbullying with different types of actors, is actually kind of described also as the ideal, also in the bullying and cyberbullying literature. But we also know that it is not that easy to install such a program in a school, because it's also quite time-consuming. You also have to train teachers, you have to train the students, etc. So I also think that if we have different tools that are different components in this whole school approach, we can also do or kind of install this system quite gradually. So we can start with smaller components and gradually build towards the whole school approach. And then a fourth thing that I would like to mention is that I think it's also very important to indeed evaluate the tools. So are these tools easy to use, for instance, by teachers or by students, but also do they enjoy using them? And of course, if the tools are evaluated positively by the users, are these tools also effective in actually reaching the goals that you would like to achieve? So if you want to promote positive bystandership, do you really also succeed in this? So after a training or after using a game, can you also observe the effects on bullying, on cyberbullying? So that is really important, and I think that it is also very important for schools themselves, because they can do a lot of activities, but yeah, they will only be inclined to stay using these tools if they also see that they are effective. So I think that kind of feedback is also very important for the schools themselves. And then, of course, if it's really about the technological tools, I think we have also experienced that it's not always easy to use these technologies, because sometimes indeed schools have certain systems, and if you have, for instance, a serious game that you would like to promote, they should have systems that really support also that game. So is it something that is easy to implement? What are also the requirements towards teachers? Because quite a lot of teachers are actually also quite afraid of using technology. So I think you really have to think about keeping it as simple as possible, especially when you're talking about technological tools. And of course, we also see that non-technological tools are oftentimes less expensive to develop, but they can be very effective. We have worked, for instance, with narratives, so letting students and teachers discuss about cyberbullying incidents, or letting them talk about a movie that addresses that topic, can actually be very effective, because then they really experience and feel what it means, for instance, to be cyberbullied. And it's also very safe, because you can then discuss it. It's a kind of thing that happens, and it's not happening in school, so you can discuss it in a quite neutral way. And then the last thing I think is important is that we are focusing right now on the problem and on the negative side, but I do think that it's also very important to indeed talk about positive uses of technologies, and also engage teachers and students. Why, for instance, not make a TikTok together? In this way, young people can show what they are doing online, but also teachers can learn about that. And by creating these kind of common activities, you will also create a sphere of trust. You also show as a teacher that you're interested in what they're doing online. And when something negative happens, that will then also be easier to talk about when there is already that trusting atmosphere. So these are the things that I think are important when indeed thinking about developing tools to address cyberbullying.
Thank you. These are very interesting and useful comments for us indeed. I have the same question for Michelle. So given her background, I'd like to ask her if she has suggestions of best practices, relevant policies or initiatives that we should take into account when building toolkits, also not necessarily digital ones, I don't know, to improve resilience or minimize impact on mental health. So please, yeah.
Thank you. So I don't want to just repeat what Heidi said, because Heidi made some really very important points that I would also second and would also say in response to that question. So I think instead of just repeating Heidi's very interesting ideas, I'm going to step back a little bit and actually say that, cyberbullying is part of a suite of behaviours, and that we need to not just focus purely on cyberbullying, but actually children don't operate in a vacuum. If they're victims of cyberbullying, they're likely to be victims of other things. They're likely to have other vulnerabilities that have led them to be a victim of cyberbullying. And likewise, perpetrators of cyberbullying have often experienced adverse social circumstances and so on. So I think if I take a slightly bigger picture view, then Heidi might help you. In developing any kind of toolkit, it's really important that we start to account for the heterogeneity of the group. So we talk about children and young people like they're all the same, and actually I don't think anybody intends that, and they're certainly not all the same either. They have different developmental milestones, they have different chronological ages, they have different personal life experiences, they have different familial setups, they have different vulnerabilities to certain things. We've also mentioned kind of risk and protective factors at various points during this roundtable discussion, and different types of children respond differently to different kinds of risk factors and different kinds of protective factors. So I think one of the things that we always run the risk of with research and developing toolkits is that we tend to engage the children that are easier to engage the ones who are keen to be part of research projects, the ones that teachers select and say, oh, these 5 children, they'll be really useful to you as an advisory group. And unfortunately, we really need to start getting to those other children that don't come forward. And I've done quite a lot of work, for example, with looked after children, children who are in foster care, adopted children, children who live in children's homes. They have very different experiences to a child who's doing well academically, has 2 parents and 2 sisters sitting at home. And they bring different kinds of voices to a toolkit, and they need to be heard. The same with kind of asylum-seeking children, refugee children. They will have experienced a huge amount of adverse experiences before they come to the classroom. So if they're experiencing bullying, that will be one traumatic event for them, one thing that they're processing and dealing with. But the chances are they might be dealing with witnessing domestic violence. They might be unfortunately victims of child abuse as well. They might be looked after children who have got attachment problems. There might be children who've got special educational needs or disabilities, physical or mental health disabilities. And their experiences are going to be different to the academically performing middle-class child with a good family background. And their ideas about what's going to work and what's going to impact them will be different to those groups as well. And I think where the research is really lacking and where the toolkits are lacking is how we manage this wider heterogeneous group, and we're not just solely focusing on the white middle-class European child. And I think we also, in any toolkit, need to account for those wider systemic challenges. As Heidi said, structural inequalities, challenges of poverty, digital inequalities, health inequalities, socioeconomic inequalities and challenges are also going to impact the way in which cyberbullying is experienced, but also the way it's perpetrated. And I think Heidi made a really good point about parents. The whole school approach is something I really do advocate for in a mental health framework. Parents are role models to children, and if they're perpetuating hate speech, or even just speech that's on the borderline of hate speech, or if they're making rude or mean comments on their own social media profiles and the young person is witnessing that, it gives a kind of sense of what is and isn't acceptable to them. So absolutely working with parents, we can't separate children out from their social and community circumstances. So in any toolkit, we need to think about how we reach the wider community, the wider family, and schools, and absolutely teachers play a crucial role. In my own research on mental health and social media, we found that adolescents, they turned to digital platforms for information about their mental health and other issues like cyberbullying, but they wanted it validated in the classroom. So this blend, and I can't remember who raised it, somebody else raised this blend of online and offline. We live in an integrated world now. It's neither just digital nor physical. There's actually this general blend of the different parts of the life. And the young people in our research study were quite clear that they wanted to seek information and support through digital platforms, but they needed that to be validated in person by teachers in the classroom, and part of that educational process was actually beyond the digital. So it's kind of bringing the two spaces together. But the problem was teachers themselves don't feel very well equipped to manage mental health or cyberbullying or digital literacy or any of these kind of things that all go together, and we can't separate them out. That they struggle to do that. So one of the things we did in our own research in terms of a toolkit is we're developing what we're calling the Digital Ethics of Care Toolkit, which is stepping back away from cyberbullying specifically and is much more about children's online conduct. Of course, cyberbullying is part of their conduct and the way in which they present themselves in virtual spaces. And we developed this Digital Ethics of Care framework with adolescents. We're now co-producing some materials with 10 and 11-year-olds, because again, somebody else said cyberbullying is affecting younger and younger age groups, but mental health is also impacting younger and younger age groups. We're seeing much more mental health crises in 5, 7 and 9-year-olds than we were previously, and some of that is related to the risk and protective factors that they're being exposed to in online environments, in social gaming and social media, which they're not always supposed to be on, but we know they are on, they are using these things. So we're trying to create a toolkit that the young people themselves have created the stories and the vignettes and the ideas around solutions to how children of their age ought to be solving problems. One of them is cyberbullying, but there are all sorts of other social scenarios in these storyboards as well. So it's the 10 and 11-year-olds who've created the storyboards. We now have an artist who's actually bringing them to life. And we're working with a group of teachers to create lesson plans for the classroom that go with the storyboards, and we're going to start evaluating how useful they are. But the whole kind of underpinning of that is around empathy and moral conduct online. So it's not just about bullying, but how you see yourself and what you believe is and isn't acceptable in an online space obviously will feed into cyberbullying as well. And one of the interesting things, again, that Heidi mentioned about this bystander intervention, the old social psychology studies have been showing this for years, the problem of whistleblowing, the problem of standing back and not wanting to get involved. And the online environment is just an extension of that. It's not something separate. It's not something new. It's something we've been experiencing for decades, trying to get people to, and children particularly, to stand up and say something is actually a really difficult thing to do.
Thank you very much. I don't know if I can make a last question to Valerio before he leaves. Quick one. Yeah, so we've heard a lot of experiences. So what do you think could be the role of artificial intelligence in all these? So should we look for technologies that moderate online exchanges, that blocks people? What about, I don't know, we all have different judgments on what is offensive or not. So how can we build technologies that take all these into account? I know it's a difficult question.
Yes, but I have enough time before my train leaves. So I'll try to give my best answer. So I'll first answer a slightly different question. So what we should do as the people who develop technology, before answering to what the technology should do. And I think I gathered from all the comments I heard in this panel so far that we should listen to other experts in other areas. It has been said in several ways. We started doing that, but definitely, I mean, every software component has to be founded in the expertise of someone else. Some people from all the areas represented today. That's definitely something we need to do. We are doing it already. You are doing it in the Kid Actions. So, then what should the technology do? Well, moderate and block. It's I don't have hard data to back this up, but it seems not to be working very well. At least not with hate speech or other phenomenon. Yeah, of course. I'm talking about automatic moderation, right? I'm not talking about moderation in general. That works. That does work a lot. But software that detects unwanted content, even in cyberbullying, with such confidence that it can take a decision to, obfuscate a message or block a conversation. It just it doesn't exist, and I am confident in saying that it will not exist for quite a long time. I mean, we are just not there for all the problems that I was mentioning before and all these other problems. Also because it's so much contextual, right? This also has been said. I liked a lot when Federico was talking about, getting to know the person you're interviewing and not treating it just like a data point, right? The result of a checkbox. And that, of course, it's great. It doesn't scale up, unfortunately, but it is great. And we should not base our software on the same assumption. So I'm not a big fan, given the effect I witnessed of automatic moderation, automatic blocking, and all those things that takes this, the very hard decision from a software. Also because of a different, of another reason as well. This is something that Heidi, I think, mentioned in the very beginning, that someone needs to take the responsibility of such a hard decision, right? If you block conversation, if you censor, basically, if it's a public platform, even if it's right, something maybe under certain circumstances, it is right to block them, but still, whose decision is that? It's easy to say it's the machine's decision, but yeah, it doesn't work like that. I mean, someone has to take the responsibility. Who wants to take that responsibility? That's not an easy not an easy problem to disentangle. So rather, there are a couple of venues where I think that I think are more promising technology-wise. One is develop systems that support the decision of humans. So suggestions, maybe, instead of a system that says, this message is blocked, a system that is more explainable. And we know that is hard, but there is a lot of research now in computational machinery to develop explainable systems. So a system that says, no, this message is, might be hurtful to someone for this and this reason, so maybe you need to think twice before sending it, or you need these keys to understand this message you received. This may be hurtful for you, all these kind of things. So systems that dialogue in a way with both the sender and the receiver of messages that could be hurtful. And that's one thing I think we need to work more towards. And the other thing, also, it has been mentioned with very different vocabulary to what I have used to, but I think that the main point was still there, and it's about the perspectives. So far, we have worked, we as computational linguists, mostly under the assumption that there is one truth, something that is offensive is offensive to everyone, right? It's the problem I was saying at the beginning. We have 3 PhD students from Cambridge annotating a data set. That's the truth. But it's obvious now that that's not the case at all, especially with cyberbullying and all these problems, that something could be hurtful to someone and not hurtful at all to someone else, or could be hurtful for very different reasons that affects the victims in very different ways. And that needs to be coded into the models from the very beginning of the development, from all these pipelines of I'm saying it should be coded into the data sets even before developing automatic models on top of those data sets. So the perspectives, that's the term I use, need to be part of the technology from the very beginning. What I think. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if...
Sorry, and apologies, I think I just need to leave in a couple of seconds. Thank you again very much for inviting me.
Bye, thank you. Yeah, if there are comments or questions from the audience, I cannot see the chat from here, so just let me know if there are questions. Otherwise, I have a few more. To Anita, so something we have struggled with a bit, or we have discussed a lot, is the issue of ethics and privacy when dealing with cyberbullying and with adolescents. So could you comment on this? Have you some experience on the topic?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the, let's say, thing that we need to always keep in mind, right, with digital research, but of course it's also one of the limitations that we have to deal with. So with my own projects, it's, there is always this tension, if you want, right? From one side, you want to be able to access as many, of course here I'm just focusing on digital type of data, even if of course I fully agree with what Federico said before, that there is also all that part of research that really has to do with talking with people and making use of these traditional methodological tools, but just sticking to digital types of data for the sake of the answer. So there is always this tension between wanting to access as many data as possible, right, to understand more, to understand better, and dealing with the best practices in digital research that mostly have to deal with, making sure that we're respecting people's expectation of privacy, people's expectation of, what the information that they put online will end up being used for. So one of the, and this is a particular problem for issues such as cyberbullying that I said before, often occurs in private spaces. So, what is ethics in online research, digital research, is just still something that is under development. First of all, this is something that has to be said. So different countries, sometimes different institutions tend to have different standards. So for instance, in the UK, we tend to have very, very, very rigid standards on what we can and what we cannot do. I'm aware that other countries, also other European countries, that will be a little bit more relaxed. So I have to talk with my British experience in mind here. So for instance, in my own research, we are definitely bound to use open data that is easily and openly accessible through the surface or clear web, so things that basically you can somehow access through via Google, for instance, through a normal search engine, or things that, for instance, let's think about social media such as Facebook, okay, just to make an example, that can be accessible to open groups. So just if you have to try to collect data with closed, not to mention private groups, that become much more difficult, especially if you have to do with automatic collection. It can be a little bit more feasible if you're doing things like digital ethnography or manual collection of data, but still you need to convince the ethical committee, and that is not always very easy to do, especially because we're discussing about minors, we're discussing about sensitive data by definition, and it's a problem. So how to deal with this issue? I think that multi-method research, in a way, is the answer here, because even if I admit that there is this small part of the researcher inside my head, sometimes why I cannot access all the data that I want to without any problem, but we need to understand the complexity of things, and of course, some rules and some limitations are in place, and for a good reason, because of course it's important to protect people online, because there are ethical boundaries that the researchers have to deal with. So again, we need to remember that the digital data that we are accessing is by definition a limited understanding of the problem. We need to be aware of this limitation, which is not saying that it's not useful. It is useful. They can still give us a lot of information, but it is an intrinsic limitation of the material that we are using, and this also reflects on what Valerio was saying before, right? Garbage in, garbage out, and the importance to keeping a human in the loop, if you want, in the process. Otherwise, there is this issue with building systems that are somehow relying from their beginning, from the inception, from data that are necessarily incomplete and not perfect. So that's why, going back to what was said before, also the importance to knowing and fully acknowledging that these data are not going to be perfect, and they need to use for other tools. So for instance, they use interviews, surveys, digital ethnography, so just trying to bring all these things together, so that of course, that's in social sciences at least, we acknowledge that we're not in a sort of lab. There are always limitations in the data that we are trying to collect, but at least we can use different ways trying to minimize biases and errors and limitations as much as we can, trying to get the more complete picture. I don't know if this answered to your question.
I don't know. I saw Davide nodding, so if you want to add something.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. No, it's working. No, I definitely agree. I've actually always been very fascinating between the combination of self-report and naturally occurring data, and it is true that when it comes to natural data, there are matters of privacy that we need to take into account. There are guidelines, of course, like the AOR guidelines, which is the Association of Internet Researchers, which give us an idea of how we can conceive of privacy online beyond binary lines. But of course, when it comes to minors, it is difficult. And I would also like to add that it is difficult also to do self-report research with minors. So studying cyberbullying is actually something very complicated because of the sensitivity of the topic, because even if you're collecting natural data, your ethical committee may not want you to go there, or you may want to be very wary about the kind of data you're going to publish. On the other hand, if you're going to interview people or survey them, you know that there are questions you cannot ask, and also there is a problem of social desirability bias. So combining methods, it's always the key to me, but it's also true that we always need to understand of researchers as something that is limited in its own. So we cannot really overcome these limits. And I think that cyberbullying is a great example of how difficult it is to do research in general, and especially with young people. So yeah, that was just to, go confirm what you were just saying about the difficulties, because all the projects that I mentioned before are actually based on self-report data, but that doesn't mean that the kind of answers we're gonna get are gonna be objective. There is nothing as objectivity in research. So yeah, we need to find a balance and try to do the best we can with what we have, basically. So yeah.
Thank you. Maybe we have time for a last question. So if there are no questions from the audience, I have a last one for Federico. So you mentioned that you have worked on stereotypes, and we have discussed here the role of online and offline conversations, social media, but I was wondering what is the role of news channels and of journalists, or in general of adults communicating online, and what's the impact of these channels on cyberbullying and the channels that are used rather by adolescents and kids? What do you think?
Thank you very much for this question. I think it's a key question, it's a crucial one. I have to say that I agree with all the people that have spoken beforehand, and what David has said about the difficulty of finding, the perfect methodology. I mean, yeah, that's a problem, especially when we work with minors, not just in cyberbullying. I work with unaccompanied minors on a couple of projects based in Sicily, in Palermo. I mean, this is an issue. This is an issue in terms of collecting data, in terms of interviewing people, talking to people, involving other stakeholders and partners, and trying to find a common solution. So I totally agree with David that we don't have a, surely I don't have a solution myself after so many years of research and also trying to implement research. So your question is key also from that point of view. First of all, I like to say that I like the idea that we need to do more ethnographic research also on the use of media by teenagers and kids. We don't know much about that. Also, of course, we may have, we have some research. There was a research, there was EuroKids, if I'm not wrong, that, actually in Italy and in other countries, tried to understand what kind of media kids and teenagers used, and what was the message, what were the messages that they got from these media. We don't know much about this. Actually, we should update their research also, because we don't know what kind of media they consume themselves, apart from social media. I mean, media in a more sort of traditional way, traditional sense. I totally agree with Michelle. We need to also listen to different types of people and teenagers and kids. We assume that the ideal kinds of object, inverted commas, of our study is the middle class European teenager or kid. Actually, this is not what we need to deal with. Also because that's why when I mention online and offline, actually on live, to use a neologism we are all familiar with. This is the environment we move in. But for people that go, they live in shelter cares, in shelters, that live in foster cares, that we live in different kind of situations. Maybe the bully is not digital, it's real, it's physical, it's it comes from other, even from family, from their friends, even from civil servants sometimes. So the police. So actually, it's quite complex. What do we know about these people, not just the usual kind of ideal target that we have in mind, in terms of, again, media consume, media kind of representation or misrepresentation. How do they see themselves, in the media system? We know that, for instance, unaccompanied minors or even migrants, they don't consume the same kind of media that we all consume. I mean, when I say we, I mean, researchers based in the UK, Italy, France, and other countries. We're talking about different media, also informal media, informal settings. We don't know much about these informal settings and informal ways of exchanging information and data, among them. So we need ethnographic research a lot. I think we need also to engage with the media people working in the media sector, to see what they can do for us and with us. We need to work together. They need to talk about cyberbullying also, again, beyond bias and stereotypes, themselves. So we need the media to be fully engaged on the representation of cyberbullying and, the people that may be victims of cyberbullying. So we need this community of practice that involve also the media operators. And in terms of media representation, there's plenty of stereotypes. We see that. We see that, for instance, when we talk about gender issues, when we talk about machismo, when we talk about, violence and gender violence. We've got plenty of stereotypes and, biases there. What we can do, what can we do as researchers, but also as, people working in society, engaging with society and with professionals. Professionals are another stakeholder. We mentioned families, we mentioned teachers. I absolutely agree with Michelle and Heike when they mention families and teachers. But we need to engage with professionals. So people, civil servants, the police forces, working on these matters. People in the media that are interviewing targets of bullying, of cyberbullying, or hate speech. What do they know about this phenomenon? Where do they get the information from? What are the data they use? Are the same data that we talk about, the same data sets that we are trying to collect and build, or some other data, some other sources of information? Do they have a direct relation with the targets? To what extent? Or maybe they have a relation with the target through civil servants or people that working or dealing with them. This is a key issue for us in terms of misrepresentation or representation going beyond stereotypes. And again, I say what I said also at the very beginning of my first answer. Stereotypes are in schools, in our environments, in textbooks. We need to work together with publishers, teachers on these kind of stereotypes in order to represent society as complex as it is, not just the same kind of usual kind of images or misrepresentation of society. What Michelle said is crucial. Again, we need to listen to the complexity of society, but we need to involve everybody in this kind of listening kind of practice and zone. And so media professionals need, they need us. They do need us. And there's so much will, they are keen to work and also to improve their practices and their methodologies. But sometimes we don't talk to each other. And this is a problem. We do have European projects that may involve media operators, teachers, and practitioners, across different professions. But sometimes we don't. We just care about the data collection, the analysis, and improving our methodologies. But then, what do we do with this data? How do we communicate them to the media professionals? Actually, what is the dissemination that we do that could be really beneficial to people in society and to media professionals? Do we have community of practices involving media professionals? And I conclude, letting our students, the kids, engaging with media professionals, telling them what they need also to know, what they want to know about society, what they want to talk about society. It would be great, amazing to have labs involving media professionals, violence, to go beyond stereotypes, and also to provide media professionals with their, the students, the kids' perspectives, needs, questions, and sometimes also answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we are at the end of our session. Thanks again to our panelists. I think we got lots of interesting comments and feedback, and we will do our best to take your feedback into account in the next phase of Kid Actions. Maybe we'll see you again at the last forum, the second forum next year. So thank you very much. Now we have break.
Thank you to the speakers. Thank you to the speakers online. I think it was super interesting and the perfect example of actually what we wanted to reach today. So different background, different experiences. So again, thank you. I know it was actually also long, so now it's time for a break. We have, it's now time for a break. We have 30 minutes. For the people on site, you can go outside. Please take your jacket because unfortunately due to the COVID rules, we cannot do it here, but just outside the door. For the people online, please come back at, let me check the time. It's about 30 minutes exactly. Okay, so it will be 15 past 5. So, okay, thank you. And see you later with Alex and the very last session of this day.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Yeah, because I already his slides here.
Okay.
So maybe we can delete the older version and.
sorry. I want to. Okay. Welcome back. Please take a seat again. And I hope the people who are following us online are there and you also had the coffee as we did. So now it is a very, very important moment for us because we have the pleasure to have here from UK Alex Holmes. Alex is a net speaker. Hi, Alex, welcome. And he's Deputy CEO at the nonprofit Diana Awards. He is an anti-bullying ambassador, and when he was 16 years old, he founded a program to prevent violence and bullying among younger people, and particularly at schools. So he will tell us more about his important mission. He will tell us more about the program he founded during his keynote presentation. So thank you a lot again, Alex, for being here today. The floor is yours, and I will leave you the laptop.
Brilliant. It's really good to be here today. So my name's Alex, and I'm from a non-profit called the Diana Awards. You'll probably be able to recognise that silhouette. It is Princess Diana, and we are founded on the belief that young people have the power to change the world. And for me, this story is very personal because at school I faced bullying. I didn't face so much of it online, and I'm going to talk about that, but I have made it sort of my mission to try and help young people stand up for themselves and stand up for others. So just to set the scene, I'm going to show you a very short video which will explain a bit more about my story and some of the aims. Great, and that just sets the scene really. In the UK, you might be aware the government is trying to, and these are their words, not mine, make the UK the safest place to be online in the world, which doesn't really make sense, does it? When the internet is global, you can't make one country safe. But nevertheless, like many other countries, at the moment through our parliament, politicians are now thinking about how they drive forward this safety agenda and try and make the internet safer, not just for children, but for all people. Now, at my charity, I'm Deputy CEO, but I also, for a long, long time, have worked very closely with a lot of the social media companies. So I'm on the advisory board, Trust and Safety, for Twitter, for Twitch, TikTok, Yubo, Facebook, Instagram, and a few others. And actually the programme that is run in the UK and Ireland is funded by Facebook and Instagram for secondary schools. So any secondary school that wants anti-bullying ambassadors, which I'm going to explain a little bit more, is actually funded by Facebook and Instagram. And I think that's an important note to sort of start, because unfortunately governments across the world are not investing in this area enough. So it is going to rely on other players taking a responsible approach to this. And we're really pleased that Facebook and Instagram are one of those. And yeah, because I always like to show it, I'm very pleased also to have had the chance to speak to the Queen about bullying, who also thought it was a bit of a problem. I don't think she's herself on Facebook or Instagram yet, but did know a little bit about it, and it was very enjoyable to talk to about bullying, and in particular cyberbullying, something that her grandson, Prince William, has done quite a bit around. So when I was at school, this was me. I was unfortunately on the receiving end of some racism about that age. So my dad, he's black, his family's from Jamaica, and then my mum, she's white, her side's from Spain. And unfortunately, some students in my class would treat me differently because of that background, and it absolutely affected my confidence, my self-esteem. But more importantly, when I got to secondary school, it helped me come up with an idea about actually what was missing during my experience of bullying. And that was really that the young people that surrounded me, that were in my lessons, in my classes, didn't stand up for me and didn't necessarily know how to protect themselves from bullying. So I came up with this idea of anti-bullying ambassadors, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that, but I'm also just going to talk to you about some really important lessons, I think, when it comes to us thinking about this. And it's great to be here as well, and hearing from so many great presentations earlier. So the first important thing, I think, is that we must tackle all types of bullying behaviour. We need to also remember, I think, an emphasis that this is behaviour, and it's being demonstrated in that way. And I just wanted to remind actually a couple of things, and it's come up in a few sessions, but first of all, just in the UK, around 40% of young people have experienced bullying in school, face-to-face, and it's around 20% of young people have experienced bullying online. And I think that is a really important thing to remember, that actually for a lot of children, the experience that they have online when it comes to cyberbullying is very rarely just online on its own. It usually starts at school. And a good example of this sort of story is a boy who's an ambassador in the south of England called Tom, and this is his story.
I felt victimized at times, bullied, my sexuality, something I didn't choose. I was growing up, I was different, I didn't just feel it, I knew it. Either way people treated me, the way I had to go out, I couldn't go up and play football with guys or go braid hair with girls. So I was kind of alone enough pretty much. Bullying has shaped me, but it's destroyed me now. I started getting teased and bullied for in camp and not playing football with guys, and then having to hang out with girls and then getting bullied about that. It's like the idea of someone tapping, and the build-up of taps only destroy you inside, that it starts to get irritating, starts to hurt, starts to message me on Facebook profiles. They've created blank profiles to then be able to message me and tell me to just ignore myself. When you have that tapping in your head and you're already thinking as it and makes it real, kind of destroys you. And
So that was Tom's story, and I think does show the importance of cyberbullying. It can have a real impact, but also painted that picture of what was going on at school, then continued online. And again, certainly for the UK, 1 out of 5 children aged 10 to 15 experienced some type of online bullying, so very similar to our 20% stat. And then 38% reported they experienced bullying behaviour in person, so a big increase there. And for those 3 out of 4 children who had experienced online bullying behaviour, at least some of it was at school or during school time. Again, reinforcing that idea of how important school is. And then UNICEF also found that half of the world's teens experience peer violence in and around school, and physical fights and bullying disrupt the education of 150 million 13 to 15-year-olds worldwide. So I think from that we can hopefully maybe agree that cyberbullying creates rarely very few new victims of bullying. And actually, it's often an experience that's already been happening face-to-face, offline, and then continues online. And I think for children, that is incredibly important. That idea that we need to remember that it does often start at school. So then it brings me to this idea of how we use that time, and I know this project is definitely considering that. And actually, a really crazy stat that I found out is that we spend, on average, 11,000 hours of our life at school, a huge amount of time. And actually, if just for one of those hours you're made to feel upset, unsafe, or uncomfortable, well, we know that studies have shown that you remember that for the rest of your life and that it affects your mental health. So I think that then suggests to me that empowering young people is incredibly important and that they are a part of the solution. Which is where it came to this idea that I had at school, that actually maybe we can encourage young people to stand up instead of standing by and be part of the solution instead of past the problem. And more importantly, even though I was bullied at school, when I created this team, I didn't just want people that had been bullied. I actually wanted people that had witnessed bullying and done nothing, and maybe even had engaged in bullying themselves, because actually I think it's very important that those young people command a lot of respect and can bring the rest of the school on board. So actually, when they were doing their assemblies or presentations, if a child in the audience couldn't relate to that anti-bullying team, those peer ambassadors, then it wasn't going to be effective. And therefore, we actively recruited young people that had been part of the problem in the past and recognised their mistake, but also that had been affected or just witnessed bullying. And I'm just going to show you a short video now which shows you a couple of examples across the UK and Ireland of what these young people did in their school to particularly try and focus on cyberbullying, which you can imagine they also did a lot on other types of bullying, but as this course, this presentation rather, is very much focused on cyberbullying, I wanted to show you this.
Our job as anti-bullying ambassadors, teaching the students about e-safety, especially passwords and personal information. Your password is like a toothbrush. You shouldn't share it with anybody. Who wants to share a toothbrush?
So we as anti-bullying ambassadors have created our own website where anyone can easily report bullying. So on the social media sites such as Facebook, it's really easy to report. So we thought we would use this same technology to be able to report bullying.
We've had lots of days where, like, activity days where we've done like cyberbullying, like for the whole day, so they're clear that we're serious about bullying.
E-safety is a big part of the anti-bullying ambassadors' work. This goes well with our way to our minds so that even when they're walking up the stairs.
One of the things we do for e-safety is the granny room. When sharing something online, stop and think, would you be okay with your granny saying?
Cheers, Mary and Joseph!
Reporting and supporting was an initiative we had this year to try to get people, if they saw something, just to tell someone, even if they didn't know if it was bullying, if they just thought it was strange behaviour, just because we wanted the school to be a happier place for everyone else.
We started it with our confidential email address within the school, which is monitored by anti-bullying.
t-shirt or this means they can't see your color. That's why I came to dance. More of a toe, I'm used to pizza.
So if somebody's being bullied online and say one of the anti-bullying ambassadors noticed it, we message like the person and we say, and if the bullying continues, then we go to the principal, or we all like kind of work together to try to stop it, and we be there for the person that's being bullied because they can't feel alone.
Students in this school are really, really innovative and creative when coming up with new ideas to spread the word of the anti-bullying ambassadors. One of them being the hashtag Stand Up Against Bullying. So whenever they see bullying happening online, one of the things that they might do is spread the hashtag.
Great, and I actually realised I put in the non-subtitle version there, so big kudos to the translators who not only had to interpret Irish and British accents, but didn't have the subtitles there. But I think it also just reminds us that all those ideas came from young people, and I think too often we don't trust and give power to young people because they often know the things that are going to work, and the programme that we do, we don't have sort of set schemes of work. Actually, it's more about some basic principles, some ideas, and then the young people take those and they implement them. And I think the other thing we should probably do more of is ask young people what they want. So I thought this was very interesting, sort of analysis again from UNICEF, but 32% of young people thought that government should be responsible for ending cyberbullying, but also 31% said they felt young people, so that's great that they recognise that actually young people have a really important job, and then about 29% said the internet companies. And our programme, the Anti-Bullying Ambassador Programme, is one of a number of great programs across the world, and you'll probably be aware of Roots or Kiva or various other initiatives. And ours very recently had another sort of brief evaluation, which was with Demos, and was really strong again in finding a link between what the young people were doing in their school and the programme and how it actually made a difference. And you can find that report on the Diana Awards website. I'll put a link at the end. So I think peer-to-peer programmes are incredibly important. The idea that young people are probably the biggest asset that we all have in schools, because they absolutely can shape attitudes and change behaviours. I think it's important that we remember that. And there's lots of peer evaluated programs out there, again, that I think work differently in different contexts. We're doing a lot around, certainly in the UK, and I know Australia and the European Commission as well, are thinking about sort of regulation, and we're always urging sort of caution around that, partly because there's been a lot of talk about what should be done, not least in the UK, where you may have been aware during the World Cup, we had a lot of sort of racism directed towards footballers on social media, in particular Twitter and Instagram. But when Twitter did the analysis, actually 99% of the accounts that were being racist to footballers were not anonymous, which often people think it's anonymous accounts, and that's part of the problem. And even more, I think it was like 98% was actually from the UK, those accounts. So it suggests that we have a bit of a problem there with racism. But I think what people often think, well, the problem with the internet and cyberbullying is the anonymity aspect. But I think for children it's not so much of an issue, but comes in trends. You'll all probably remember Ask FM or sort of anonymous platforms, and I suppose when those were existing, then it was more of an issue. But I think that's something we need to just be careful about, because there was a call for everyone to have to verify their identity in order to use social media. But again, I think that's problematic, because we know that women and girls in certain countries don't have access to official ID and therefore wouldn't be able to prove their identity. We also know that groups from protected minorities, or who have protected characteristics, perhaps because of their sexuality or because of their marital status or their religion, they may want actually anonymous to use the internet anonymous in order to access communities and share their story. And of course, raising awareness, it can be incredibly important if you want to whistleblow or report something to have an anonymity. So I think we always have to be careful about that. And it worries me sometimes when we go down that route, particularly politicians. I think one of the biggest things when it comes to cyberbullying and working with the tech companies is this idea of scale. So when you think about it, a lot of the social media companies are looking after user numbers, populations bigger than some countries. So it's a huge thing to do. But just to bring it back to that school aspect, let's not forget what goes on in our schools. You know, there's 150 million children that are on the receiving end of bullying every year. Still suggests to me that yes, we need to continue to make the internet a safer place, but we've still got lots of work to do in our schools, somewhere that in theory should be slightly easier to manage bullying and behaviour. But coming back to the platforms, I thought this was very interesting actually, that will we ever, thinking about that question, will we ever get rid of cyberbullying? Well, actually, thinking about this, if a platform has 1 billion users, so TikTok, for example, has just passed the 1 billion users mark, if they all posted once a day and then the platform enforced that 99% of the time, that would still leave 10 million errors on the platform every day. And obviously each of those 10 million errors are not just a statistic, there's a story behind it, and those young people have been affected by the issue. But that just goes to show that I can't see there being a complete solution just from technology anytime soon because of the scale that we're talking about. And again, I think machine learning, artificial intelligence cannot solve cyberbullying yet. This still remains a human problem. When you think about language and how complex that is, and how different terminology or terms or phrases means different things across the world, I don't think yet a computer or machine learning is absolutely able to pick up the context of language or understand the difference between a joke and something harmful compared to something offensive. So therefore, when some people say, well, can social media companies not just flag or prevent any sort of harmful word or content from being posted? Well, certainly with things like language, it's not quite yet possible with that. For things like child sexual abuse imagery, obviously that's a lot more clear-cut, and we've been able to identify that sort of materials and stop that in many cases from being posted. But if I was to use a racist word today on my social media, it may be because that was a word used against me and I'm choosing to raise awareness of it. So therefore, a sort of blanket approach by a computer would not be helpful. It would stop me from sharing my experience and raising awareness of the issue. And therefore, we can't use that same sort of approach that we've been able to use for like COVID misinformation, where we've been able to put a label over that content because clearly there's a sort of health benefit there of presenting factual information. I think with things like behaviour, online harm, it's slightly more difficult to do that. They are getting better at flagging things, but I think it's a hard thing to do really well successfully. So therefore, I think it still goes back to all of you in this room who are doing such a good job to create resources and tools. I think there's always going to be a demand from particularly teachers, support staff who are educating future generations to have access to tools that have been developed by experts like yourself. And I think you're going to remain a very important part of the solution and trying to defeat cyberbullying. I've kind of summed this up a little bit before we move on to questions with these sort of thoughts. And I think that one, that preventing cyberbullying is going to continue to be a global and not country approach. I don't think we're quite there yet with that. When you look at terrorism, when you look at child sexual abuse imagery, governments work really well together on those two issues. They are not working so well on the wider online harms, and I think that's going to be problematic when different governments prioritise different types of harm. And I think we've seen that in countries like Germany, where hate speech has been really sort of prioritised, and that's resulted in Facebook moving more moderators to remove content quicker in that country. But a bit like the vaccination efforts, other areas will fall behind, and that's a shame. I think research and joint working between platforms and academics needs to happen more. They're not open enough, and I think they've got so much data, often the sort of data that we want in terms of behaviour, patterns, trends. There have been some examples, and colleagues I know who have led on sort of research studies with the companies have had mixed perceptions of how good that's been. Sometimes they've gone on a great journey together on a study, and then the platform has decided to scrap it because they didn't like the results or the outcomes. So I think definitely there needs to be more sort of enforced research, and companies need to hand over anonymized more of that data so we can understand what's happening on their platform beyond the reports, the transparency reports they put out. I think we've got to be cautious not to blame all of the issues which has been mentioned on the internet. We know that for the majority of young people, they do lead very safe and happy lives online, and we know about the benefits. And what I don't always appreciate is politicians using the internet as an excuse for not investing in programs or not reducing issues like poverty or mental health, which obviously can have an impact on how we behave. So we have to be careful that we don't let the media as well, who probably have a slightly ulterior motive of trying to make the companies, the social media companies, be less profitable because it's eating into their profits. So we have to make sure that we're not too quick to blame everything, and we continue to shine a light on what's going on in our schools. And just as a sort of sum up, really, our website is antibullyingpro.com, and we've got lots of free resources on there. On the Diana Award website as well, you can find some of the studies. And then two projects which I thought were particularly relevant. This was a time when we were still part of Europe, a time that I miss very much, because we're no longer eligible, I think, for a lot of these sort of projects. But we did two around bullying and social and emotional learning. One was Selma, Hacking Hate, and again, it had quite a few country partners from Europe, and the other was Enable, and we've got all of our toolkits and resources on there, and it was great actually to work with Sabrina on that and a few other colleagues. And just before questions, I think the last one, which I always like, because really this is what sort of cyberbullying often can come down to, that idea that all of us really have the power to stop and reflect on our attitude, and before we post something or before we say something, think, is what we're about to say true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it kind? Is it necessary? In a different order that I said them. If it's not one of those things, then probably not worth saying, but we definitely have more work to do. I am confident that we will make some real efforts, but I worry with cyberbullying that unless we do a lot more around traditional types of bullying and a lot more in schools, we're not going to see the difference online just because we make the platforms do slightly more. There's still a lot of opportunity for bullying and for that bullying to continue online. In the last sort of couple of minutes, would really welcome any questions, particularly as I do have the lucky position to work with some of the social media companies on things like cyberbullying. They're always very interested in any questions or anything to take away. So if anyone does have anything, it would be great to get those questions now. Thanks. Do we have any questions? Yes. I think we've got a microphone coming to you, so we'll just wait for that.
Does it work? Yeah. Thank you very much for your contribution. I wanted to ask you, according to your experience, if is it possible to work in straight contact with social media companies, as you said, to incorporate the reporting of cases of cyberbullying within the social media themselves? Because I think that using specific apps for cyberbullying reporting or even websites kind of hinder the victims to get access to a dedicated website and report a case. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think? How is it possible, and to what extent is it possible to work straight directly with the big social media companies to try to help the victims to speak out?
Do you want the members of the public to be able to speak directly to the companies, or organizations like yourself?
Like, victims that maybe, I don't know, like a user of TikTok, which is a victim of cyberbullying, has the chance to report the case of himself directly on TikTok, and not to go on a website.
Great question. And I think we're very lucky in the UK still that in Europe we have safer internet centres, and many of those safer internet centres have helplines that will work directly with the companies to prioritise issues around online safety. So I think at the moment a user could, every single platform has that reporting mechanism. How effective that is varies between sort of young people you speak to. When young people say to me, I have reported what's happening to me on the platform, I ask to look at their phone with their permission, because every report you do goes into an inbox on most of the platforms. And often I can't see the report. So it does make me think that for some young people, they're not reporting for whatever reason, and that's a problem, because the moment you report something on most of the biggest platforms, you receive a notification, you're told when that's report's been read and the decision, and on some more sophisticated like Facebook, you can score the decision, and in some cases they will go back and look and review that. I can't find the report when a lot of young people say they reported, so it makes me think there's a slight mistake there. But I think you can to some extent have that direct relationship with the platform. You can report it yourself. It's completely confidential and anonymous. How much more you could do in terms of sort of being able to pick up the phone and speak to the platform, I think wouldn't work when you look at the scale and look at how many moderators they have. But I think what it does prove to me, and one of the things I keep telling the companies they need to do better at, is telling users how reporting works and being upfront, because it's very hard to find that information. You have to go to their safety centres, and I think that's a problem with companies. They're very good at marketing themselves, or brands that use them. They're very good at innovating the product, constantly coming up with new sort of features and story functions, but they're not very good at marketing safety or innovating safety. And I would like to see them do more user education. I'm always surprised that a company still hasn't come up with a really sort of fun course or game or way to learn about safety in-app, on the app, or learn how to protect your community or make the platform a kinder place. I think it's a missed opportunity, and they haven't done it yet. But and also equally with reporting tools, you need to be able to understand how to do that. So I think there's a lot more that needs to be done there. Sorry, Sabrina, we'll go to you next.
Thanks, Alex, for a very great presentation and all the work you're doing to empower children and young people. But maybe from your personal experience, any advice for the adults? Because I feel there is a huge lack of actually empowering adults, and I feel a lot of adults and let's say teachers, but also parents, aunts, uncles, older brothers and sisters, they maybe see that something is going on, but they don't know how to start a conversation with their students, their child, etc. So any advice for us adults, if we see, if we are aware of such a situation, what could we do to make the first conversation with the young people and the children?
Yeah, great question. And I think it's a very hard job that adults and parents have. I think not least because if you read the media, the internet sounds a very scary place, and I think you can be fearful as a parent or an adult about your child's use of the internet, which isn't always helpful because it might cause you to overreact. I think with something like this, often we forget about things that work offline, work online. So actually, if you notice something wrong with a child or a child you know, applying the same sort of principles as how you'd react if it was going on face-to-face is the same. So, I think asking, the right questions. I think the biggest thing, so we did a bit of a study actually recently for a campaign called Don't Face It Alone. And young people told us how they would like bullying to be resolved. And the biggest thing they said is they don't want their adults, teachers, school, or parents to take over their problem. That's a big fear about reporting or speaking out or telling another adult. You worry that if you speak out, your parent or your adult might make it worse. So the biggest thing they said is they would like the adult to respond to the question, what would you like to do about this? Or how could we solve this together? And that gives them some of the power back that they lost through the bullying. So I think something as simple as the choices of language and after you praised them, for speaking out and asking like, what can we do about this? How can we solve this together? Gives them some of that power back and helps them see a little bit more clearly. So I think that's the first thing, because the worst thing you could do is sort of limit the use of technology or, take the phone away or message the person, the parents of the person doing the bullying on Facebook and saying, your son is horrible, is bullying my child, all that sort of thing, which does happen. And instead you kind of want a calm reaction. But maybe the other thing is just before that, is I think that the best parents and adults are the ones that, and we talked about here actually in one of the toolkits being developed, are the ones that proactively, before an incident happens, explores questions. So, has that conversation. What would you do if you ever saw this on the internet? How would you react if one of your friends did this on a platform? Having those sort of questions, or even real life examples from the news and saying to your child or a child I read about this happening on Twitch and streaming or the gaming platform. What did you think of that? Like, actually, I think those sort of questions are very helpful and build that resilience before an incident happens. But I think with all things, like trusting your sort of instinct, they're not being afraid to ask your child, like, what was the best part of their day, what was the worst part, what would have made it better. Talking about situations or dilemmas or posing scenarios might be helpful for them to sort of explore that. Great, I think we have one more question here. Oh, it's just here. And then I'm around a bit later and also going to the dinner, if anyone's... Great.
I hope you can hear me. Good afternoon, everyone. Alex, thank you for very, very inspiring and very, let's say, direct and straightforward presentation. This reminds me in my childhood, because similar things happen during elementary school. So because I'm coming from mixed marriage and from post-conflict society, so it's really important to have that as a knowledge, and also acknowledge that fact that Great Britain, Ireland, and other countries facing similar problems that we can share and use as examples of the good practices, let's say. I would like to ask you, because I'm youth worker, I'm peace builder. I come from Bosnia and Herzegovina, but the last 3 years I'm living in Italy and I'm working a lot with Belgium. I would like to know, where do you see the youth workers in general, all around the globe, the way of involving these topics and much more in depth in youth work, in non-formal education, because by my profession I'm professor, but I'm much safer in a way of the non-formal education field, because I think it's really important. What happened after school or before school, I think somewhere it's much more crucial, and we need also to listen that and to follow that impacts and inputs. Third, do you think that, because I read in your bibliography that you made Britain a happier place?
Well, I tried. I tried.
But this is the way. What are the inputs? What we can use as an example of the good practices, and create similar programs, approaches, networking, develop certain things together, especially in post-conflict societies, especially for the people on the move, that we know that now Mediterranean route is popular, then Balkan route, how we can, because the children, minors, they are full of the traumas, and we also need to help them. How we can, because we said somewhere at the beginning that hate speech, bullying, cyberbullying, they are all interconnected. How we can proceed that more in depth, and how we can create better, happier place. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, well done for being a youth worker. For me, that was a real escape from the bullying after school. You know, I had a youth club that I went to outside of school, and it provided a lot of sort of safety for me. I think you're right that we forget about the role that youth workers can take. Sadly, from a UK context, youth clubs have been cut, so you know there's not as many as there should be. But we do have things like scouts, you know, those sort of beavers, sort of leaders that do stuff outside. I think it comes back to, though, which is why this is a great conference and a great project, is having up-to-date, innovative toolkits that work, because I think there's not enough resources for youth workers to properly explore some of these issues. They're not really fun and they're not really cool or fresh, and I think that's a problem because it's not going to land well with young people. So I do think this is why projects and programs like this are really important, because youth workers need the sort of tools and resources to explore this confidently, and I would like to see more of those, because some of the best things I've seen are sort of created videos. Some of them involve influencers or celebrities, some are just scenarios, and you can put them on and then have a conversation together with young people. So, you know, play a video and then talk about that. But I don't see enough sort of quality ones, and the same sort of resources. So I think there needs to be more of that. And then just your second question around the sort of impact of joining up, and how, particularly in Europe, there's a lot of trauma. I think it would be good to do more partnership work. So certainly for us, we have most of the stuff on our websites. There's not really sort of a secret sauce or ingredients. Like, the biggest thing is, you know, the young people, the ideas that young people have, and we have got a YouTube channel which has got sort of hundreds of young people talking about what worked well in their school, and there's the case studies, the evaluations are on our website. So I think there could be more sort of sharing of that, and I think also we would like to see, so Facebook and Instagram fund a lot of bullying prevention work in the UK, in Ireland, in Australia, a few other countries, but there could be sort of more joined up, and it's not just got to be down to them, it could be across government. So I think there's definitely a lot more room to do more together, and yeah, if anyone wants to sort of partner with us or others, then, you know, we'd be very open to that. And I hear your point around how we're going to need to do more with young people who are facing a lot of traumas from perhaps migration or who knows in the future, climate change, and, you know, how it might affect migration and so on. But yes, I think I maybe answered your question a little bit. Anything else before we wrap up? Great. Thank you. Well, I'm around at the end, so do come and chat to me or drop me an email. I'll just put my details back on the screen. But yeah, always happy to hear from you. Oops, sorry, just find the right one. Great. Thank you very much.
Was it yours? No. Okay. Okay. Okay, it's there already. Sorry, didn't see that.
So, thank you, Alex, for this inspiring and also very direct and touching presentation. We are going to the conclusions of this first day. So I would like to thank again all the speakers who were with us today here in Trento or online. It was a very inspiring and interesting first day. We heard the research perspective and also we, thanks to Alex, we heard about a few stories, direct stories about bullying. Tomorrow it will be another important day. We will add more perspectives to this discussion because we will have the opportunity to present our consortium and our researchers will present the preliminary outputs of this project, so both the digital education platform and the educational toolkit we are developing within Kid Actions. Then the discussion will be even more interactive because we are going to host a roundtable with several speakers. This time there will be representatives from the industry and industry sector and NGOs. So even more discussions, even more experiences and best practice on the table. So I hope you will be with us tomorrow again, tomorrow morning. We will meet at 9 here and we will start the, sorry for the noise, we will start with the first session at 9:30. So thank you all again for your attention and participation and see you tomorrow.